made an explosive break, just an explosion. I mean, just like a shotgun went off. And when he did, the guy behind me, big guy named Gary, a lot bigger than me, froze, turned into a ghost and just froze. And when it was over, I went on the bridge trying to figure out where this thing went, whatever. And by the time we got Gary into the car, he was muttering, "Hey Bubba, hey Bubba," and that's all he would say. We kept trying to get him to finish the sentence, but that's all we could get out of his mouth. And it took about 15 minutes to get back to where we were staying. Got him in the living room, and we got him in that thing. Actually, the guy asked, "What in the hell happened to him?" He was pale. You hear people say that. He turned his lights. He goes, "Gary was pale, and the bottom of his eyes were dark, and he was looking forward." And we finally got him to finish his sentence, and he said, "Hey Bubba, that first break would have taken me out." And he was trying to say that for now probably 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So needless to say, in 2010, 2011, with members of my team, we started heavy research, and that culminated in being involved in the Oxford, Louisiana Collateral Hominid Project, which was conducted by the University of Oxford and the Museum of Zoology, Lausanne, Switzerland. And this was to map a collateral hominid occupying our forests, and it was to go public. Now, you've all heard of disinformation, counter disinformation, I'm sure. This study was a double-edged sword. It was a true study. They were doing the work, but they didn't tell you the results. Matter of fact, they misled the AP, and we know because we have letters from the director, who was named Brian Sykes, because our first submission into that sample group was found to be unknown. And they had the study open for several time periods until like January. Results were supposed to come out in March. And so in January, they actually wrote us and said, "We're going to hold the study. Can you get a hair off a live specimen?" So it took us 2 months to do that. So we did that. And we submitted that. And that's with a hydrated follicle. In other words, it's 15 to 30 minutes off the subject. And this subject that we gathered that sample from happens to be the one that left this 22-inch footprint that's on the far left of this table over here. And he was an older subject. We got his bite imprint. We found 170 of his feet print that day. His hand prints down where they used the projectile to take down a deer, cooperative hunting, and a bunch of other stuff. All went with the sample. When they tested this thing, it was never released to the AP within the study.
Don't.
So, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Part of our deal at the end to address this, but I know I don't have a super long time to do this today. This is about a 2.5 to 3 hour presentation.
Got it in the folder.
It's done to a scientific group or done to a peer group. So we're going to run through this today as fast as we can and make room for the next speaker to come on. So let's go ahead and get with it. So I'm going to start this off with a quote by Sir Conan Doyle. That is, "When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be."
This is an apple, it's a thunderbolt.
You understand what he's saying? We factored in everything else. So it quacks like a duck, and waddles like a duck, and swims like a duck, and flies like a duck. What's the most likely thing it actually is?
And then I can use that one if you're okay.
Just because ducks don't live in that pond,
Thank you.
you don't eliminate the obvious. And that's what we tend to do with a lot of anomalous stuff. With the ancient history, treasure, cryptid animals, off-world beings, ultra-terrestrial, whatever it may be. The moment it doesn't fit the narrative, it's tossed. Science does not use scientific process. Scientific process doesn't contain bias. It doesn't contain "I think." It doesn't even contain "I know." It contains, here's what we found, and here's what we found about it when we picked it up, when we measured it, when we heated it. This is all we know. This is not done in ancient history, in the world of treasure, in the world of off-worlders, or in the world of our cryptids. People need to ask that why. So part one is ecology. We're going to start with diet and acquisition. So one of the things you notice is a lot of the biologists run around and say, what do they eat? You have a massive animal. And I'm going to tell you right now, a large male, this is the honest truth, will go every bit of 3,200 to 3,300 pounds. This is something that biology doesn't explain, is how did where does all their food come from? Yet, you take those biologists out in the field, they don't know what to eat. Now you take a traditional Native American out in the field on their home turf, they'll show you what to eat. The biologist has no clue all the stuff you can eat. They don't realize what a hominid or a hominin will consume when it's hungry. In this case, algae and greens through the wintertime and year round even. And we find that sometimes it's just when there's no other food, algae and sand will work because it does have that beneficial protein. It has citric acid. It has a lot of things in it that we take for granted. Another thing, like you'll find in these river basins here, is Russian olive fruit. Now, this is a subsistence food. Anywhere you have Russian olive, you have the potential of having Bigfoot activity. And not only that, but you have the potential of having family groups or younger individuals, not these transient subjects that most people encounter are just going from A to B or on hunting and things like that. And with a range of 100 miles every 24 hours, if they want to move, the big ones, then that's what I mean. People are going to see it and go, oh man, and then we saw a sighting and we never had another one. Yeah, well, if you wouldn't believe in the terrain they cover, look how much terrain a bear will cover when it's looking for territory. 100 miles is nothing. Pinyon pine nut. Regionally, this is another subsistence food source. So when you have Russian olive in the bottomlands, you also often in those type of climates have pinon or other type of edible pine nuts at their higher elevation. Juniper berries. This is one that most people wouldn't think about. We think of gin and things like that produced by these, but they're very astringent. But they will consume them at certain times of year. Yucca stem and base rib. Okay, so this is another thing that we take for granted. You look at, there's millions of yucca throughout in Spanish Bay and other plants like that, all types of altitudes through the Southwest USA and the Western regional. So the base of these are completely edible and they contain moisture. And I use them at times when you go to pretty extreme stuff. We're not carrying enough supplies, whatever you see when you grab and bite the bottom. And what you'll see here, actually, in the right-hand photo, if you can see that, you're going to see the teeth marks of a large hominid. And with the teeth being about the same size as my thumbnail, about twice the size of the average grown male adult. Birds. Birds are another subsistence food. They get them easy. If you would know where a bird roosts, you can walk up and grab it in the dark. Most, it's like chickens. They go docile. They can't see. They'll flop around if you flush them, but they're very easily to prey upon. So it just takes paying attention. And one of the favorite ones we've seen are woodpecker. And why? Once a woodpecker roosts, they're yours. If you can pop them out of that tree, they're yours. And we see where the Bigfoots have actually stuck a finger or two in the woodpecker hole and just busted the side of the tree out to get the bird. Like, it seems effortless. This is one that people don't expect. When hard times are hard times, it's the way it is. And the picture on the right, even though you probably can't see it, and we will throw this up on YouTube and stuff, and we'll toss these frames in so people can go back and see this stuff. But the frame on the right is scat, Bigfoot scat, with porcupine quills and skin in it, swallowed whole. This would cause extreme duress to just about any species I can think of. And they will do stuff like this. Now, deer, that's something we'd all assume that they prey on. That's an animal that, of course, and they have no problem getting them. Often in places where the Bigfoots are prevalent, where they are a lot, the deer won't fear humans. This is an odd thing. You think, wow, I'd be 3 times as scared of a human being. But you got to figure, Bigfoot use stealth. When they hunt, they do so in a manner that no one ever sees them or hears them, deer included. They take deer from a herd of deer without alerting the other deer. Now, a lot of native tribes do that too, because what are you going to do? You're going to go running your game off. It's not like hunting season like we have, where you go out periodically and shoot one. You don't really care what happens after that in a sense. But if you're living on that herd, in most native regions with most populations, they're very close to that herd. They don't run that herd off. They try to keep and maintain them as best they can and not alert them to slaughter. Livestock. Livestock is another one that's very important. They are opportunistic feeders. They're not all the same. Even though you could describe them as a people having somewhat of a culture, which enables them to live in pretty close proximity to humans, to modern humans, without being detected, is they usually won't mess with stuff. It's a full understanding you're going to drag it home if you go cause problems. But you will find the younger individuals doing this. And they can cause a lot of grief. And in this case, you see a cow leg bone with a hominid bite mark in the side of it and scrape. And again, it's exactly the same scale as the previous one we showed. This would come from an individual between 10 and 11 foot probably. Grubbing logs. This is another food resource. We all understand that completely. As bears do it, and even other animals, even coyotes will dig in logs after grubs. But they don't lift the bark or they lift pieces of the tree up and set them down, especially lift them up and set them down next to the other section. So there's a lot of different indicators when the Bigfoots are doing it and feeding. Of course, also there's a complete absence of any claw marks or anything like that, or even bite marks or chew marks, because they're doing it with their fingers. Something we've noticed in association with this, I don't know if we have a picture of it or not, but they will use not just the grubs, but they will eat the material that the grub leaves behind. So you know that sawdust looking material that's inside the channels in the wood when you get done? Well, they'll pick that out and eat it as well. Probably because it's already been, the cellulose has already been broken down by a previous animal and makes it digestible. Digging with sticks. So this row comes up under tool use and method. Okay, so we always assume that, well, you know, they just run around, they're big monkeys and they do whatever, and that's not true. So tool use is really prevalent. Of course, crows use tools, and all types of primates use tools, and this has been shown. So a raven will use a stick to get something out of the ground or whatever. Even drop rocks in a bottle to raise the amount of liquid in the bottle so it can drain. That's pretty intelligent. So what would we expect of something that potentially could be one of our ancestors or a possible cousin? In this case, we see where the stick is still laying there they did the digging with. And there was tracks from two subjects here. And they're both known subjects to us. We have prints from them on the table because we studied this family unit for about 6 years solid. And was in with them hundreds of times during that 6-year period. So this was one of their zones that they would move in and out and do this with. So no other animal is going to physically pick up a stick and use it to dig. And there's a big difference between digging with a stick and an animal digging with its claws. You won't find linear marks spaced evenly throughout the entire structure. An animal will dig this way, this way, this way, this way, straight up and down. And so this type of digging, and then as well, you have, of course, Bigfoot feet print leading up to the event, leading away from the event. Another method is rocks for small game. Now, when we go into these bosky regions, and we're in places where we know there's no people and there's no one else in there, and we've been in there, we're the only ones. And I mean by that is you couldn't get in without leaving some kind of marker sign, and no human beings are leaving any sign. We often find rocks up on top of the recent forest debris. So in this case, Russian olive leaves, grass, and other things, and the rock will be sitting on top of it. Sometimes we'll go through, and the next morning when we come out, there's a rock laying there. Sometimes we'll walk through, of course, and come out, and there'll be a tree laying across the trail where we just came out. Rocks for large game. This was collected when we got the 170 prints, the hair, this cast that's on the end. This large subject we assumed was old because his teeth imprint were missing teeth, and the hair we got was 7 inches long and gray. And as well, he was using two smaller subjects to run a deer down or walk a deer down the mountain until it got to him, and he was on all fours. We got his handprints around 3 and had this rock. And this rock weighs about 80 pounds, and it's granite, and it's wedge-shaped, and he apparently had thrown it from his position to where the deer was, because you could see where the deer tracks came down, made a little turn in front of a bush, and then the bush was totally flattened out, the rock was laying there, and there was no more deer prints. And we searched about 150 feet away from this full circle with 4 people and never found where this rock came from. So it got carried into that location, apparently for that purpose. So now we'll move on to tracks. These are the ones where you guys are going to probably want to see some pretty good pictures later, but on the right-hand side here, I'm actually showing handprints and feet prints. And what you think, and I guess a lot of people think, or possibly, is that a hand looks like my hand, that my foot looks like my foot. And it does if I plant it that way. But if I plant my foot or my hand, doesn't matter. Let's say I do it like this. And if you look at that, we can all look at the form it makes. And it makes kind of a paisley looking form with a twist on the end. Well, if you see that in the sand, what are you, or mud or anything else, what are you going to think? You're not going to think that's a foot, because we're programmed to see a whole track when we look at the ground. They seldom plant their whole stuff on their ground. They move on every bit of their surfaces. It's pretty amazing, too, that they don't want to leave sign. They can cross stuff and not leave sign. And then a true tracker Bigfoot will go in and say, hey, wait a second. What are these little divots? What are these little sweeps and things like that? they're running around on their fingertips, on their toe tips, on the edge of their foot, and moving like that. So oftentimes you'll see where they're in mud or something, and they'll step on the sides of their feet and things. They just try not to get all into it. And speaking of that, we have tracks here where they never would have gotten them. I hardly ever see the tracks of the adults in this location.
And they probably never would have, but one of the younger ones was running and sticking a thorn and stuff out into the riverbed. We apparently had intersected him, and Rat took him 2 steps out and grabbed him up, just snatched him. His prints just ended. He went nowhere. And snatched him up, and then he turned around, made a big displacement, and stepped right back in his own track and went back out. And that's why we had a track over a track sitting here. So one was in, one was out. But you could tell that he made the least amount of mark as he possibly could as he was doing that river to get back to juice.
Iron, zinc.
Knuckles and fists, you guys can't see this. So on the left-hand photo here, the small one, it's a set of 7-inch wide knuckle prints, and they're spaced about 4 feet, I believe, if I look at the tape. So this is the female of this group. So that's how she stands, and her fists are countered about 15 degrees to each other. So you can imagine her on all fours on her fists, and her hands like 7.5 inches
Off the top of her knuckles measure. Adult hand. So this hand is 15 inches long, 15 inches wide open, and my hand is 8 inches wide, fit with my fingers out, fits exactly in the width of its palm. That gives you the idea of the scale. Tracks, of course, do not. So if it's a living creature and it's out there and they're really going around, they have kids and they have all this stuff happening, you're not just going to find deep here. What do kids do? Kids roll around like little apes, like, right? Well, what do you think these guys are going to roll around like? This is the marks from a juvenile on his knees and his hands, sliding across the sand on his knees and his hands. And he actually defecates or poops a little in the tracks. And then something comes along and picks him again. He's about 6-7 feet out of the sand, was able to reach all the way out and just pick him out of the sand. And she only left one edge of a footprint doing that. Everything else was hard packed. It was all, gravelly bottom cemented together. So this is an infant. We have his tracks when he was a little older over here on the table. But at this point, he was 4¼ inches. And this is the first time we saw this subject be set down by the mother where we could find any marks of it. We had found scat that was blue because of the lactating mother and the clotting milk. So it makes the scat blue or green color just like a human baby. We found that at the time, about the time the infant would have been born, shortly after that. But these prints were, like they were probably 6 or 8 months later, maybe even a little bit longer, and it's apparently about the feet were about 4¼ inches at that time. Toddler, 6 inch or so, so you're talking basically the equivalent of a 2-year-old, something like that maybe. This was one that we encountered after we recorded a male killing a dog, and then we went down there to examine, because we set up big sound recording equipment, 36-inch dishes, that catch a human voice or discussion at 2 miles. And with this, we would actually track them. We knew where the riverbed system was, so we were about a mile off the riverbed, and we could hit them on the riverbed and track them along the riverbed, and then we could tell how fast their progression is and what the male was doing and the family was doing. And at one point, he had come in to the family group, apparently because there was a newborn, dogs rousted him, we tore a dog apart, and then we went down there to examine the area the next day. We found we didn't find much from the event other than a lot of stuff busted up, not much prints. It's all hard packed, but we did find the juvenile prints or a young toddler's prints leading out into the sand. And these are almost comical because when you get a good look at these, the big toe structure makes up almost 30 to 40% of the foot when they're at this size. Their toes huge for their size. And then it doesn't grow as fast as the rest of the foot relative to that length. So juvenile 8-inch standard. This is juvenile 9-inch. That print is on the table right here. This is one that we finally named George, and we watched him grow up till his foot's now 14 to 15 inches. Here's the tracking adolescent at 10. These are young, 9 and 11. So this is actually who we call George and Amos. So, and we've given them the names not because that's their names. That's just how we designate the subject from subject. Adolescent at 14 inches, and this is one of the subjects in the family group. There's about 7 in the family group. This was larger, or at this time, larger than George, And we don't know what happens to them after they get so big. After about 17 inches, you don't see them down there with the family much anymore. So here's one at 17, and on the left side is a track of my boot print, and above it is its foot. You can see, if you can see that it dwarfs my foot and footprint. Now this picture, Tara and I planted a camera up at an event where people had, these aren't Bigfooters, these are just people, saw something huge on all fours, looked like a big monkey with yellowish colored hair, will come down to the road, stand up, go back on all fours, bolt across the road and off the bottom. And then the guy in the highway department says, hey man, we listen to deer down there all the time. Deer that get hit on that pass, we take them down and toss them down off the road right there because it's got a steep drop. And so basically, each deer that gets hit, they've been throwing it over the side, and 17-inch subject has been coming, apparently getting those from that area, and this is where he crossed. So we went and set up game cams on that. We hit it so well, I had a hard time finding the camera, and all we got on it was activity. And this isn't, we didn't go next to the highway, we actually went in quite a ways, and where these tracks ended up being found. And the only thing we got was something was throwing snowballs into the frame of the camera. And it happened like 3:30 in the morning. It only happened a couple times. Something, well, there's a bunch of triggers on the camera, but nothing in the frame. And so, but at two frames, or 2 times, the camera triggers, then you just see snow fly into the frame, and that's it. So he's activating the IR, and he's looking, I think that might have been a 850 nanometer IR. So the lower the nanometer IR, the easier it is for a hominid or for a primate to see the light. So upwards around 940, it becomes very invisible. This camera wasn't that high. You could see a little bit of glow, and I'm sure you could see a lot more glow. And it triggered that glow at one point in time, just wouldn't get into it. But he was throwing snow into it. So here's tracks of the alpha female. So this, we've studied her a lot. So we have photographs of her. We've scaled her using survey techniques. We've been on her prints, on her scat. We've been feet behind her of her breathing or her snoring. These tracks are 20 inches long.
It's like this piece came.
That's a considerable size animal. She scaled. I thought she was around 9 foot when we first took pictures and gave an estimate. And when we used survey techniques and scaled her off everything around her, she ended up being 10 foot.
Okay, tell me when I got him in.
That's massive. She was 44 inches across the hip. Now, granted, she's not near as wide as the big males are. Big males are like football players. They're huge. I mean, they really are. And but she didn't look that way. She had the classic Venus body type in a sense, where she had large butts, large thighs, narrower shoulders. And at that time, well, I have pictures in the computer. I won't be able to get to them now. Maybe later this evening when it gets dark, I'll try to pop them out.
Thank you so much.
Everything's finished. We have a little time, but she's carrying George, which is in the photo. So I saw her from a mile away, down, right close to a mile. But I had elevation on her. She was in river bottom. And as soon as I pressed and started taking pictures from that range, she picked up George and took off. And I was looking at her through a 70 millimeter zoom lens, because for my eye up here, it's just a black dot. But there shouldn't be any black dots in the river bottom, period. And she's dissimilar, of course, than everything else out there. So what we do is use high photography, and then we're getting a lot of echo. Hello. Okay, so we use pretty high photography, and when we enhance those things and brought them in, we also apply what's called a vector scope, which uses certain frequencies of light, and you compare it to all the other stuff. And she can, just her, has a different frequency of light than everything else in the entire frame. You can separate her from everything else. And in these photos, they're good enough to see that she had George in her arms. And he was every bit of 6.5, 7 foot at that time. So it was about 12 to 13 inches. And she still picked him up like a toddler and carried him off. And she did it at almost a mile. So that tells you how shy and reactive they can be, and why they're hard to find and hard to see. Yeah, how she even knew we were up there and spotted us stressing, it's pretty obvious. But that distance, and there's an antelope is like the only thing I could think of that will spot you at that distance and take off if it wants to. They don't know what you are. The alpha male. Now this is the one, we don't have his feet print. They're bigger than this one. I didn't have casting material when I ran into it, but it was 6 years before we found the first mark of it. And then it was years after that when I actually got to see the large heavens, which were 23 inch, and I may add one. These are his though, and the print on the right is the 23-inch print. And it's odd because the toes are almost as wide, the big toe is as big as my heel. If that gives you any size of scale that you look at. So when you see these tracks, your brain doesn't even put them together, it parts them out. Oh, that's a divot here, a divot there. Your brain doesn't even want to put it together unless you can catch that shine, and the trackers know what I'm talking about. As you look into the sun or whatever, you can see leaf mattering, or you can see shine from whoever took a step. Unless you get that at 30 feet, and you're on top of them, you walk right over them. You don't even realize. My brain didn't even realize. I didn't spot the first set. My buddy did, and I was almost standing on it. This one, though, this print was taken less than 3 minutes after it was made, and while the subject was still 40 feet from me. The one on the left is with the first picture, the only ones we had the indication of. And the step gaps in between those, there's a 7-foot measuring stick there. The first step's 8 feet. The second step's around 9. And the next step to get out of the river bottom was only 12. And everything was frozen solid. This is about 4-inch thick ice. And he just punched right through it in every single step and cleared that last to the frozen bank and left no more sign. Okay, so foliage manipulation. And you guys might have to keep a time. A long time you guys might have to keep a time and keep me out when I'm done. So foliage manipulation is something they do for all types of reasons. And it's one of the easiest ways to track them once you know what you're looking at, what they do, and where they do it. It's not hard to find if they're in an area. This is what they'll do. So they build structures. The purpose is totally up to debate unless someone actually sees them, what the purpose would be. But they look like shelters, but they're not big enough for them. They're not big enough for the big ones. So we assume that they're stuffing kids in them, at least from my point of view. But I've also found them the size that's about the biggest thing you could fit in is a wild turkey. Now, I don't know why they're doing that. And this is one case of that. So on the right-hand side, there's the young man sitting in what is a human size. I could easily camp in this thing if I wanted to. But on the left is another one that, like I said, when it was together, you may have only held turkey-sized animal or creature. So it's pretty strange. Sunshades, they'll take foliage and drag them off into ravines and things like that if there's nowhere else good to get shade or if they're too hot. Breaks and twists. This is what we use as indicators to follow them in the field. And they'll take specific types of trees and twist them up. And they'll do it in a way that nothing else can. They'll do things that you or I can only dream of when it comes to section breaking. In other words, where you have to break a tree by immense pressure on 2 points very close together to get a clean snap. They cannot just do it to a 1-inch sapling. They can do it to a 3-inch tree where it won't splinter. They'll just snap it clean and it'll be totally green tree. Now, you guys, most everybody here has probably encountered firewood, encountered trees, and understands the durability. And if you break a green tree, how the splintering occurs and all this. They'll make clean breaks and stuff like that, all left and right. In this case, what we see, we call these signposts, where they'll twist a fibrous tree, whether it be cedar or something else like that, and they'll repetitively twist it almost to death, and they'll rub on it. And this is where we get most of our hair samples from, because it'll just grab the hair. We've gone back 5 years later on the same post that's still got the same hair in it. But you'll see where they just rub their skin and everything else, and it'll smell like mom. It'll smell like whoever did it. On the left is a sectional break, and we call these daytime breaks or day breaks, where they're occupying at the time, where the family is actually at might be a quarter of a mile to a half-mile stretch, and they're kind of dispersed in there a little bit loosely or whatever. But when they go into these areas, they'll do these snaps like this, the entry and exit points in these areas through thick foliage, and they'll do it each day they're in there. And so you can go to these entry points and look at the breaks, and if they're still wet, and they're that day, you know that they're in that area at that time. The reason they're doing it, we assume, is so that the other subjects that are transient, going in and out from the group, be it the adolescents and the older teenagers and the adults, they can easily find where that group is at that time. They can just track them right back down. Rub and set posts, we kind of already went over this a little bit. And I want to say about these, though, when we find them, they're predictable. So I never found one. I mean, it took like 8 years. And then I found one. And then I went to the same kind of spot in another place, found another one. Then we went to Michigan, 1,550 miles where we researched. Got another one. And so it became predictable after a while where they're going to put them. And they put them at these corridors before they get into a thick foliage zone of one type or another tree. They'll take the little trees out front, something dissimilar, usually fibrous as they can find it, and they'll snap it off and create a rub right there. And it's just like a signpost in front. And often it doesn't mark exactly where you go in, but they'll do this seasonally almost, or do it every couple of weeks or whatever when they're in an area. Blinds and barriers and blinds. So they construct barriers and blinds, and they'll do it out of some massive stuff. They'll build a barrier out of 60, 70-foot trees just to hide behind. A 70-foot tree weighing where 2,500, 3,000 pounds. We've witnessed, I may show some, where they utilize trees that are over 100 foot tall and over 31 inches thick at the base. And a tree that size weighs 18,000 pounds. And where they've ripped them out of the ground, carried them into places, and set them down and stacked them up to make an area that can't be traveled through by deer or other creatures. And then it's just a total ambush zone. They can still move through this stuff, and almost nothing else can. This picture of foliage manipulation is for territory and prowess. And the reason I say that is this is one picture where on the left hand of the small photo, you guys will realize this too, is a pine tree about 30 foot. And it was ripped out, straight out like a carrot. And the entire taproot is on the pine tree. And now it's set sideways, where it still had all the needles and everything when it was done. And it was just set and propped in between two other trees sideways to make kind of a fence. But to do this, simple little deal, hey, I just want to stack up a little fence here. This thing actually took out a 30-foot tree and stripped it straight out of the ground. Now, how many of you ever seen a pine tree down with its full taproot on the tree? Ever, anywhere. Now, if a bank collapses and you have a soft dirt slough in the fall, you may end up with a tree hanging out of that with a taproot on it. But other than that, that root's going to snap off. It's not going to stay there. If the tree's dead, that's one of the first things thrown out right below the root zone. You can shake the trees when they're dead because the taproot's already gone. This is fully intact and green when you pull it out. That takes immense. The amount of strength it would take just to extract a tree like that without breaking the root is tremendous, especially when it has a curve in it where it's been growing around a rock or an obstruction. The trees on the right are in the form of an X, and this is a territorial marker or a station marker. And this is on the edge of a hunting zone. We went up into this area just to see this gigantic stuff. And there's another whole story about the lodge. And you guys can look into that. That's another big story about something we found up here that I wanted to refine. But this is an example of how big they'll make a simple territorial X with. One tree is about 90 foot, the other tree is 80 foot. So these trees are well over 4,000 to 5,000 pounds. And they've stood them up and put them into a perfect X in the forest. Defecation. This is probably I'd say it's a shitty thing to study, right? But it's probably the most definitive as to what they do, who they are, where they go. Now, everyone likes to have all these big mythical fantasies about what these things are, and I'm going to tell you, they're real, and they're so real they don't take any of this woo or any of the paranormal stuff to explain anything they really do. But one of the best indicators, I said, is scat material, and placement of this material is a big deal. So where is it going? So hardly any other researchers out there in the world find scat. If they ever do, it's never on a repeated basis. But once you learn where they go and how they prefer to go, then it becomes predictable. Now, we went in on this group of 7 on purpose one day to do a scat sampling and found 48 piles in one day. And it represented about 5 days of defecation for 7 individuals. But it would have been about 60 or more pounds of scat material. And how many coyotes would take to produce 60 pounds of scat material in 5 days? It's an awful lot. What we discovered was that they were doing it in groups. So the whole family would go together, and then they would have a subject 20 feet away, apparently maybe watching, and then he would go. Or he just doesn't like to poop right next to the rest of the family. I don't know, maybe he's shy. But that's the way they were doing it, over and over and over. And they were doing it in water courses or behind thick foliage or guarded areas up against bluffs and stuff, somewhere you're never just going to walk upon. Interpretation of what's in the scat material, again, is the most definitive trait. This single scat material had a grasshopper leg, deer fur, rodent bone, pinyon pine nut, and Russian olive seed, all in one scat. Now it tells you a little story about what he did that day before he had that defecation. But one of the biggest things it shows us is the pine nuts in this case are 5 or 7 miles, depending on which way you go, 5 to 7 miles away from where the Russian olive are. So this subject can travel 5 to 7 miles just during this period of consumption in between defecation periods. So it tells you what they're doing, where they're going. Plus he's picking up, he got deer somewhere, he got deer fur, he got a rodent, he got grasshoppers even. So one of the unique things, and I don't know if we're set up, I doubt we're set up for audio in this rig, or how to run it. Yeah, I don't think we are. So these were for another presentation. We're probably going to have to go buy them. I'm sorry, but they're recorded vocalizations. If we get time after Chulot and we can hook up the audio with these guys, I'll blast these things out for us. And all these neighbors can go, oh my gosh, what the hell is that? So foraging, this is in the behavior now. So food. They'll move as a scattered group searching as an individual for food resources. So in other words, they'll spread out in the zone 40, 50, 100 foot apart, maybe even more, and they'll pick through what they've got, and they'll just kind of go through like turkeys do. You ever watch turkeys in the field? They'll spread out and move through the field together, picking what they can pick. They'll gather and collect food and search without collection. So they'll, without picking any of it up, they'll just eat as they go, and as a solitary subject or things like that. They'll collect and deliver food to subjects at camp. Now, this is a trait that not a lot of animals do, but cats do it, and some others. You have an elderly cat. The younger cat will actually bring it food to eat if it loses the ability. We've seen the same thing with them. The subject that was on the table here had yucca fruit, which comes from 4,000 feet below. This was up at 10,000 foot, so the yucca's down there 4,000 foot below, and it's the highest one. We're bringing yucca, someone's bringing yucca fruit up, and he's biting it, consuming parts of it, but leaving these biting prints as an individual that's missing a lot of teeth. And our assumption, we never found any of those prints going down the mountain all the way. So our assumption was from that other subjects were bringing in that stuff up from the valley floor. So using top methods, plant animal hatch and migration. So what we have here is where you're learning, you can learn in 2 ways. You can learn through observation, you can learn through instruction. And what we're finding, most of this would have to be learned through instruction to understand these things. It's like when the hatchings and the gypsy moths are, and which mountain slopes that they'll hatch out on. So you'll find the sunny, you'll find the northern slopes is where, but in the sunny zones on the northern slopes is where the gypsy moth grubs will all be. And they go up there and flip 1,000-pound rocks and dig these things out. But you never see the flipping of the rocks or any of the activity until it's right at that point, right before the hatch-outs happen. So what it indicates is, why aren't you up there doing it any other time? And how in the heck do you know to go up there during the hatching and get all these things out of the ground? That's not the only one. There's a lot of food acquisition stuff that we see that would most likely take instruction. So you have an older individual, or you have witnessing through food acquisition when this is. And then it's pretty tough to teach somebody when the moths are going to hatch and things like that. So they search an individual subject for food, and they will do that. So when they get up into their earlier years, like I said, any a foot, 15, 18, 20 inch, they can be quite cantankerous about visiting farms for food, things like that. We believe that they're not as skilled as food acquisition as some of the other subjects. So they'll bop in and hit farms and hit different regional stuff and do a lot of food acquisition as solitary without having anyone else around them. They're not going to bring it to anybody else. This takes us to hunting. We use cooperative hunting techniques for small and large game. We'll kind of go over that a little bit. They'll funnel them direct here into ambush positions. So we see a lot where they'll run, there'll be a spot where maybe an arroyo drops down into a larger canyon, and you can't see any way to go down through that funnel, and they'll work them on both sides of the hill down there real slow, and then the subject will wait down there at the ambush point to snatch them up. And when I was with that big mammal that left that 23-inch print, I kept trying to go around this little corner, and every time I did, one would go to that point with me. And we call those a pinch point. And so past the pinch point, you're going to get snatched. And that's kind of over and over. Any other animal would move away from the pinch point as you approach it. And these were not doing that. They were moving toward that pinch point with me. And that's enough to really get your goat, I'll tell you. The fundamental direct air activity presence of vocal reports. So they'll make noises, stepping, and reveal themselves to animals without spooking them all the way off. And they'll do these little whoop, whoop, and do stuff like that. And they'll key the animal and get them a little edgy so they're not just standing there. And then they'll kind of follow them that way. So they don't want them to run. And we've witnessed them being very, very crafty about doing it subtly. But they want to keep them moving because they're going to get one. So, construct utilize sound traps, locate prey and danger. This is something that's pretty crafty and we've seen it a bunch of times. And they'll do it in different forms. So if they're in a thick zone or area where you got your family all hidden in there, they'll only get a couple of ways in or a couple of ways out. And they'll block those, even if it's temporary. And they'll leave in one way in, one way out. And then they'll leave a back door. And often on the way that would be the front door, they'll lay down the branches and make a crosshatch and then fill it full of leaves. And it'll be big enough to where I can't step over it, but the big ones can. And so anything that walks down that trail is going to step in that and make noise. We call them sound traps. And we hate them because they catch us. We won't have a way around them. The stuff will be so thick, our only way of progression will be through this. And you can't even pick the branches up without making noise. So we reveal ourselves. And oftentimes after we hit the sound traps, they can get one vocal report. Like this. And then we know where we're busted. So they got us. They know where we're at. They know where we're at. Build rodent small game traps, especially as nests and things. So we've seen this, and this is all we can glean from this, what's going on. They'll take a stump, natural or cut, into an open area, and they'll place the stump to where it roots side down, and they'll stuff grass underneath it. Now this, rats and stuff grass. But it's a whole different deal when you have a clump tore off and laid in there as a clump. And we have seen where we've come back later and laid these things over, and you can see where rodents have nested in them. And then we've come back and seen them turned over. And so all we can assume when we witness that is something's making a trap. It's making an area that a rodent will go nest in. So later it's an opportunistic thing. We can check that, get something to launch. Occupation. Utilize an area for 2 square miles, 5 to 7 day period as a family group. This is what we found to be average in river bottoms, such as what we have in the south. Utilize an over range approximately 100 square miles as a family group. So generally, once they're in a spot, they'll occupy it for a point in time, then they'll devour the resources, and then they'll move on to another zone, like several miles down the river, whatever. And it'll generally be about 100 square miles, 10 by 10 miles area overall that they're gaining all the resources done and movement activity. They'll change, as I said, they'll change the areas as the impact grows. So as they scare the game, they deplete the resources. They'll often just bolt from that spot completely and just relocate 4 or 5 miles down river zones or whatever, so that somewhere there's fresh going on. The overall range, do a seasonal migration, things like that. So what we have here is it's greatly varies. People say, well, do they migrate? Some do migrate. What's their range? It's much greater in some areas than it is others. And it's almost always around resource acquisition or seasonal changes in maybe a family unit. So it's based on needs, and it changes everywhere there are. So it's like humans in the sense that there's no thing one group of humans do. Some humans do migrate. They migrate in herds of reindeer, things like that. Others are extremely sedentary. We have generations never leave the same valley, and that's what we see to be true. They utilize high rugged areas to treat for solitary group of large males. And this is really interesting because it apparently, in the group we studied for 6 years, that large male was hardly ever in there. And he did vocal reports when he came in, which may not be for several months period. Often it was every couple of weeks, especially when you would have young in there with him. He was coming more often. But what we found was when you go into the highest and the biggest and most rugged areas, you have sign of the largest, biggest individuals. And you have activity that we would assume goes to male activity. Because they do obviously have a different order. They do have that set boundary. And it seems like that at a certain age, certain size, it seems like the females just don't want to mess with everything anymore. They just want to go do their own thing. And then I'll come down and visit the family once in a while, and they'll get together. So when we see in these big areas where I showed you the massive stuff, that's one of these zones. And these zones are considered very dangerous. On that particular trail, I'm not bullying anybody here. Up to 30 people have gone missing in a single year with no criminal investigation. One of our team members who went up there with me on that trip is U.S. Forest Service, 35 years, 19-year officer. Still active, still manager in the U.S. Forest Service today. He's there with me. He looked up the information to verify that information. He said that he found 37 people in 3 years is what he had found that had gone missing on that trail. Now, they've been trying to close that trail and erase this loop for a decade now. It's not on the modern maps, and most of it's closed off or off limits. And the area we found this stuff, when it hit the news and all this other stuff, we got into Eastern Mexico University, it got the KYT, the KRPs, the local news stations, ABC, NBC. U.S. Forest Service closed this entire area. And they did so to prevent adverse interactions between humans and rare and sensitive species. Now, when you do a closure for species, there's always a number on it for the species that seeks protection, but there wasn't. And it said to reduce the chance of adverse interaction. Now, that's not impact on the species. That's adverse interaction. That means the species have an impact on you as well. And that was as far as they went with that. And then Ron, of course, Ron Castor, the USFS guy, he researched that stuff and in our office could not figure out why these closures are occurring. Of course, we know why they're occurring. So grouping, how do they assemble? So the fourth family unit, 7+ individuals, the females in the lead until daddy comes home. Daddy's gone most of the time, and it seems like the mom is the boss. And you got because everything, all the activities the group does as a group, it all falls around where she's going, where she's occupied. You'll never find the rest of the group off somewhere that the mother's not, unless it's the adolescents taking off at night and doing the stuff teenagers do. They'll form large subgroups of young to hunt, forage for unit, often cause trouble. And that's what we kind of say. So the adolescents will get into groups of anywhere between, it depends on how many's around. You apparently will have adolescents from different groups join together at night and go rampage around and do stuff, hoot and holler and make all kinds of ruckus. And just like in a lot of cases with the Native Americans and with the U.S. Cavalry and these guys, a lot of the massacres and stuff happened as a result of what the teenage boys were doing at night. That happened more than once, where the tribe itself would be like, hey, don't mess with them, leave them alone. The young men would go to school, and they would go out tonight and go poke their horses. Often the response was to go and slaughter the tribe. So we see that same type of activity here, where we have mimics of a horse and mimics of a crow and all this other stuff, and then turn into primate hooping, and then you can hear how many is actually in the group. You get 8 or 10 subjects out there just screaming and going nuts and running off through the trees, like they just spooked the human, just picked on the human, and everybody kind of gets off on it. They'll form smaller subgroups, 2 to 3 older subjects to hunt, forage, to learn large game, and raid. So we see that too. It's usually when they do this, it's much more choreographed, much more controlled. This is where you see the ambush spreading and things like that. Or when they're raiding someplace, you'll see distraction happen while they're producing and conducting a raid over here. So they'll actually distract attention so they can go grab something. Males often move a few miles away, alone, when young, they'll fully mature. So they'll have feet sizes of 17, 18, 19 inches, and they're generally solitary. And they apparently, the males seem to have a much more robust, wider foot than the females. The females seem to have more feminine foot until they get real big and they get a little heavy. But we see their tracks in areas where there's really no other Bigfoot sign. And it's interesting because they also will go back into the group occasionally. They'll return. And it equates to maybe, 20, 25-year-old young guy or female who is venturing out. But still coming back home every once in a while and returning to the family. And we had one subject that we followed quite frequently up on this particular mountain, Ortiz Mountain. And over the years since we started following him, his foot had grown from around 16 to around 17 and a half. And he should be the very same subject who left the 17-inch prints that we found. And he's on that mountain by himself because you can go up there over and over and you never see sign of any other subject. And we videoed him one night descend 200 feet down a mountain in 5 seconds, jumping 30-foot leaps, and then went off up on a 30, 40-foot drop straight down over to the pinon tree that was 20 inches thick or so, and then shake it 5 times and rip it out of the ground. And then go around by the root ball and duck down. So all we could assume was when he was feeding or whatever, he jerked out with the root ball. Large males often repeat to the highest range densest areas together. So we already covered this. That the big males don't want to be around families. Now I'm going to say this too. This is also true in the 8 tribes of modern humans. So often there's zones and places like Kivas and things like that where it's only the elder males. And they will get together and do what they do. And it's without the interference or interference from any of the rest of the tribe. Often it's to retell histories and it's to share secrets and things and important natures of the tribe or make important discussions. We don't know why they're doing it, but they apparently have the same trait or habit. So this is man versus ape. The modern view, curriculum, and classification. So how does academia actually see this versus how the media tells you academia actually sees this? See, we don't get our sources from academia. We wait for the media to get it from academia and then deliver it to us. But what does academia really think? I'm going to read this. This is from a curriculum, modern curriculum, the book called Through the Lens of Anthropology, 2nd edition, 2019, Introduction to Human Evolution and Culture, Chapter 2, page 50. This is where they bring in Bigfoot. They've got an entire 2 pages just dedicated to Bigfoot. Why is this in modern anthropological curriculum? I thought it was just a fantasy and a myth. It absolutely cannot exist. How come they didn't mention any of this in fantasy, myths, and things that don't exist? These are indicators. It says that. I'll get it that work here. It says that believers should be aware that if they do cite Bigfoot, they should probably leave it alone. It probably isn't a large human-like ape. If it exists, it is probably a human who wants to be left alone, and nobody should do it harm. Recall that if a primate is bipedal, as Bigfoot is typically reported to be, it is classified as human. Now, who wants to know that? Who out there wants to wrestle that? I'm going to tell you a couple of things. I know Utah's a very patriotic state, and I know they're very concerned with their rights and preserving those rights. Well, how would you feel about all the rights you've been granted that you want to preserve so hard if you understood that there's a human out there that has more rights than you ever dreamed of? It has rights to live wherever it wants to live, and it has rights to go anywhere it wants to go, but you don't know he's out there, so you don't care. You know, a man in a prison with a large open space and a big fence can feel free until he sees a man outside that fence. And that reflects to him what else is out there in this world. What am I? How come I can't go outside this fence and look at it? Well, isn't that exactly where we stand as humanity compared to another race of humans which might be sharing our planet with? If they're out there, they can go wherever they want. They can live however they want. They're not taxed, they're not told what to do or anything else. So will you tell me what the definition of human rights is? Don't we have that right? And if they're human and they're exhibiting that right, and that right's being protected by academia and other agencies that know they exist and aren't telling you they exist, what is that? Are we getting our human rights? What is a human right? I'll tell you right now, they don't need to ask those questions, and the answers don't need an example of a group of humans living feral out there in the woods to this day. Nobody tells them where to go. Nobody tells them what to do. And they live just fine. They don't need that to happen. And you also need to ask yourself, then why in the world, other than that, why wouldn't somebody pop off it? Well, in academia, it's not worth it because you will be blacklisted, you will be shut down, the AP will lie about you, and everything else will happen. And this has happened to our foremost geneticists. This has happened to biologists and other scientists who have tried to step over this fence. Unless you're willing to say it's a big ape. If you'll say it's Gigantopithecus and it crossed the land bridge 10,000 years ago, you're in, no problem. We'll put you on TV all day long. But if you're a scientist and you say absolutely not, this is a hominid, this is a human being, but you're not going on that TV. You're not going anywhere near it. Matter of fact, you are now a nutcase who shouldn't be in science. Trying to get this to go forward if it cooperates with me. So this is what we talk about where is the proof? That's pretty interesting because the proof's been given. Why didn't you hear about it? Well, because the media hasn't told you about science and hasn't told you about true academia and professionals, just like we just said. In this case, this is a sample. This is the sample we put into the Oxford Flat Earth Project. That probably broke the bank for that because it had so much other supporting evidence. It was taken, trace of custody was immaculate. Everything was done in hermetic sealed cabinets, the whole 9 yards. There was no chance of contamination, all on film. They knew this, but that sample was not included in the study, even though they told everyone in the world that it was. Then they wrote us and said, no, it's being curated for further study at the Museum of Zoology and Museum. Well, why did we do that? And then what about this? And why hasn't it been tested? They told the world that every sample had been fully tested and qualified, but they found things like wolf, polar bear, possum, a weird polar bear, other bear hybrid that they think is being edited, blah, blah, blah. And I will tell you, when you hear something like that, it's absolute bull. And here's why. Because every hair has to get qualified first. And even a second-year biologist in most parts can take them into their lab and identify any one of the known hairs from any animal on the planet. They've got libraries of this information. The only thing you're going to test is an unknown. You're not going to ever do a DNA test on a dog hair that shows up as a dog, or even a bear. Well, look, it's a bear. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for collateral hominids. Okay, but they yet came back with results from a possum, a bear, a dog, and all these things. That right tells you the whole thing is fake. The whole damn thing. Yet the samples that were sent in that did not fit any known creature that's running around out there were not talked about or not discussed about in the test. They said every single sample is from a known animal. That sample's not. And you guys are welcome to take that number, 25076, and inquire with the Museum of Zoology in Louisiana and inquire with Oxford University and ask them where the hell that sample is. And why did you lie to the Associated Press about it? Why is the testing included? And where is it? Because we can't find out. They've tried to bury this. Now here's the next one. Sorry to say this, when they involve someone who's the biggest face in Bigfoot. That's just too bad. I'm sorry to call you out, right? But it's just the way it is. The University of New Mexico, the executive director came to us up on the reservation there and asked us to do a field study on the species. So we did. We conducted a year-long field study with the many locations. There's Bigfoot hair that's real. It's real Bigfoot hair on the table from the university study. This is called DNA evidence. This is a physical proof. Now, at the termination of this study, there was a very professional PhD who we involved in it to get our DNA analysis through, to take it to the appropriate domestic laboratories. And we didn't really need to go overseas. We had a lot of material. It was all quality. It all came with witness events, supportive evidence, tracks, all kinds of stuff, even blood. And so we gave him this evidence and to turn on. Well, he would not recontact the executive director of UNM. He would answer the phone. This is a PhD guy on TV for Bigfoot all the time. Every face in here that's ever seen a Bigfoot show's probably seen him. We had it to him. So after a year, we were going to present the findings, our field study findings, to the academics, to the professors and the students as well at this university. We're going to open it to the public, invite all the Native American elders, but we were actually doing it at an academic level. What occurred was they got a hold of this professor and invited him to come speak as well. Hey man, come share the stage. And he was going to do a speech on Gigantopithecus and how it crossed the Bering Land Bridge, which is fine, whatever. But when he got there, we asked him, because he hadn't answered the phone for a year, We're looking for the analysis. We're looking for the report. And so we get him at breakfast, or dinner, whatever it was, and we asked him straight up, what happened to the DNA material we gave you? What happened to all the physical evidence we handed you? And he just shrugged his shoulders and kept eating. And I said, hey man, no. I said, where's the trace of custody? He said, there's no trace of custody. I said, what do you mean there's no trace of custody? There's a trace of custody on everything. There's no such thing as not giving it a number when you're going to do a sample of measurement, anything. You have to have a way to refer to what you're working on. Everything has a sample when it gets submitted, everything. Each one of those submitted pieces should have had a sample number, and even the submission itself should have been named and titled. Or how are you going to keep track of it? He said, I don't know. And I said, no, you're not going to get rid of that. Who did you hand this stuff to? Where did you go? Where did you give it to? Where did it go? You didn't lose it. He said, oh, I gave it to Brian Sykes, who was the same guy who ran the Oxford Collateral Homicide Project, who lied to the AP, who in London, who we told him, no, it's not, and we told him verbatim, it's not to go overseas, and especially not to Brian Sykes. And that's the person he handed it all to. Now you tell me, what kind of professional, academic, as a professor at the University of Idaho, sorry, Jeff, sorry, but that's true, and that's what he did. Now, I'm a nobody, so I guess he just assumes he can get away with, doing whatever he does. Nobody's going to hear about who I am, and if I start crying, I'm going to sound like a jerk. But this came down to charges being filed on the executive director for committing fraud for the study, because we had no proof the study was conducted. Because he did that. They tried to go after this guy for criminal charges. They go after everyone else. Then they did a special investigation news report on KRQE there in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is a network, 22-minute show, and on it was us all over the place. On it was my crew, my team, the Native American guys that helped us, the executive director, all of them being called frauds during a special investigation. We saw the ad for this, and I drilled them. I hit them as hard as I could hit them. And they pulled our segments and our name out, but they left pictures and video of me conducting operations in the field. It's pretty amazing because as a response to that, a state senator proposed law to prevent any university monies going into what they call mythical creatures. They said this on the basis we had no proof. Because why? All the DNA and physical evidence was handed to Mr. Meldrum. And I ask you right now, as it says, where did they go? Because we don't have them. And I mean, people almost went to jail over this stuff. Now, it was discretionary funds we used. It cost $7,000 to do the year's deal. We didn't get that. We paid everything on our part out of pocket, probably not equal to that. That money went into the showing of all this information, discretionary funds. They could have used it for pizza. But the entire campus and college voted that they wanted to see the results of this Bigfoot study. And it doubled the highest showing they had for anything at that college university in 47 years. And it was the first time that the Navajo elders had ever come out of the shadows to discuss the species, in which they did. They sat down and told us all kinds of things about it. Even some of the words they speak in ancient Navajo, which was interesting because you had people who live in Fruitland there, they live in the river bottoms, and they hear these things say this word. I believe it was like Shiza. And then what was interesting was one of the elders sat down there and said, we're going to explain to you what that is. You people hear them say this word, and yes, it's not a sound, it's a word. It's ancient Navajo for just passing by. So isn't that wild? Yet all that was buried and consumed. And then we had to go do a scientific presentation to a group of scientists from University of New Mexico, from Los Alamos Laboratories, Sanville Laboratories. We had their top biologists, we had astrophysicists there. I don't know, but they were there. And all of them acting as a skeptic peer review group. That's what they do. They shoot down people's bad research. Professionally. They're called the New Mexicans for Science and Reasoning. After 3 hours, not one of them questioned any of this data. Every one of them said they all backed up. That was it. Because we laid down physical evidence, we laid down trace evidence, we laid down the entire thing with repeatable results. And they're scientists. These guys are true blue. They could not dispel what we were showing them based on these scientific principles. They had to agree. Not necessarily that it's there, but something is there that warrants scientific investigation, and it's highly likely that they missed, in his words, a large Friday. One of the guys who's the top astrophysicist for Mexico, the University of Mexico, went to dinner with us afterwards. And he told me, Dave is the guy that ran the whole thing, and the man that they had on the news show to disprove us, this guy Dave Thomas. He told me that Dave told him that he thought we had it. And he told us, if you can change Dave, you can change anybody with your information. Then Dave asked us if he could go out of the field with us. That doesn't tell you. That was their key skeptic they used to file a law, press criminal charges, and the whole 9 yards. But in the essence, it still reflects to why did we get in that situation? Why don't you know they're real? Why don't you know that they're listed in the Zoobank Genomic Library under the name Homo sapiens cognatus? See, we're Homo sapiens, but so was Neanderthal, so was Denisovan. They were all Homo sapien. They're Homo sapien neanderthalis, Homo sapien Denisovan, as Homo sapien heidelbergensis. We are Homo sapien sapien. They are Homo sapien cognatus. This is our thinking relative, is what that means in Latin. Now they've been classified, accepted, and they are listed in Zoobank Genomic Library. That means they exist. That means if I find a piece of DNA and I run that DNA through a full series, there is DNA in the Zoobank Library to compare it to show it's a Bigfoot. But they haven't told anybody here this, have they? This is where I want people to open their eyes. This is what I came here to basically produce for you today. So we're going to end this. I think I'm probably about that time with a quote by Albert Einstein. The fairest thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of the true art and science. But isn't that interesting? How science doesn't really like to deal with the mysterious, does it? It doesn't. What mysteries does science touch? And I got to remind you, science is supposed to be the study of the unknown. But how come you have things that are unknown that they won't bring into science? Is that science? We're not even seeing science. We don't see that world at all. We see the media. We see the talking heads. We see the narrative that is most convenient to keep everybody just like it is. Don't ruffle the waters. Don't upset anything. It's all good to go. And at that, I want to say thank you for hearing my presentation this evening. And you guys are all welcome to step up here in the interim and check out the Bigfoot cast and the hair and the other stuff we've got. And then I think if there's some time later, after Chuhak gets his deal done, we'll probably try to bring up some of the other information and we'll take it all another level. Thank you very much.
Questions? We have questions?
You bet. Questions are great. I had a fear I was running out of time. I'm probably out of time.
Your personal opinion. Why do they do that?
So the question is, why do they do what? Why do they hide it from us?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is, why do the powers that be hide this information? Okay, I'll give you a quick one. California state parks, admission alone. Now, granted, when you go on a vacation to a state park, what's the cheapest thing in the whole thing? Park admission. It's cheaper than you spend on hot dog buns. But they bring in $80 million a year just in park admission. What percentage of that is what people spend on a vacation to our national parks? So let's say, my gosh, you guys, Taco Bell 3 times, you spend $100 with 2 people. What do you spend in a week in the national forest? For your groceries, and your gas, and your fuel, and all your things that you need to do that, plus your park admission. Would you say that park admission is what? 10% of that? So if it's $8 to do, you go out there for a week for $80 or whatever it is. So what you have to factor is that the park admission is a very small fraction. It might be 5% maybe of what they're bringing in on park activity overall. And you're talking $80 million is only 2 to 5%. That's a single economic reason. Just that one, just the impact on state park admissions. Because if you tell people that there's a 10-foot guy running around there that might grab your sister and might rip your cake apart or whatever, it doesn't matter what people envision, they're not going out there anymore. Here's another thing. We trust academia, don't we? But let's say they admitted they exist tomorrow. What's that mean? That means that academia has either not known about it or they lied to you about it. Well, lying to you about it is pretty sinister. And not knowing about it after generations of tens of thousands of biologists out there, well, that's pretty incompetent now, isn't it? So can we trust people that don't know this thing's out there when it's out there? Means I'm incompetent. I'm an idiot. When I prefer, and I say the whole time, trust me, you're safe out there, no problem. That can thank you for asking the question. That brings up another aspect of that is potential liability. How many people have lost family members in the forests? Now we have thousands and thousands missing. I have no idea. And it's not just national forests, it's overall people missing. A tremendous amount of them come out of forested regions without country. When the agencies get caught in a sense that these things are out there, you haven't told us that they're out there. My family went out there last year and Aunt Thelma vanished and she was left behind and found her body up on the top of the cliff or something weird. Well, how many people are going to strike immediately out and say, why in the world didn't you tell us you can't take them out there? And that it could potentially present a danger. That was pretty good in 1970. None of this stuff I said it was. We have pictures of the children searching and things like that being put on. This is what was shown when they in the medium presents a myth as a mystery. Yet, in 1974, Bigfoot was included in the species list in the Olympic forest and other places in the Pacific Northwest for military training as to the species you were likely to encounter.
Come on.
They had fork, they had bear, they had all kinds of things. And Bigfoot. FBI studies in the Bigfoot hair things in the early 70s.
That's mine.
So it was being studied and that was actually being accepted right up to a certain year point. Now, we could probably look at simple changes like that. Time
to be that. Any other questions?
Okay.
Need another tripod.
Any other information? No, I sure don't. But here's what we have heard is intergroup communication over many, many miles distance. So when a large male howls, you can hear that 10 to 20 miles from one mountaintop to another. And I know because we record them off a mountain, it'll be 10 to 15 miles in distance. And in those
It
type of
changed everything.
situations, we
It
have
changed
heard
all
of
my
also
settings.
aggressive
Two
vocalization.
cameras.
Now,
We
whether or
got
not
it.
they've ever
We
met
got
up in
it.
the forest
Yeah, I know.
and,
Okay.
and had the throwdown or not, I don't know.
That's yeah. Just
Most big animals avoid conflict because it usually can
come on,
result in one or
baby.
the other end up dead,
Come on.
either from that
You're
moment or a recorded injury, lapses.
Oh, what? Okay.
Yeah, so he just mentioned that the primates in Africa often conduct
Oh,
warfare. That's
maybe
true.
that's why.
It's also funny that some do and some don't. And I think regionally a lot of that is compression of resource. The chimps are much more, I would say, affected by the compression of those resources than a Bigfoot would be, because they can literally move their family unit 150, 200 miles away and in a night or two if they have to do that. And retreat to countries that no one else can get to, where chimps and gorillas and things are very regionally compacted. And they're not built for that type of travel.
I've been told by Native Americans that were here in the Uinta Basin 2 Bigfoot tribes, and one began eating the little ones of another, and there was a war, and the good ones did away with the bad ones. Tell us about the
But 2 Bigfoot groups overstep the
Can I ask you for a favor?
resource.
Could you
One
just
way subject with road,
hold it a
they
little bit
kill
while I
another one, or even that they
Doesn't
got
have
them
to be
to each other.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a favor.
I can get the tripod for you if you want.
You may drop something, right? So wolves, there was a group of wolves at the time that went rogue and were killing pups amongst this one pack. And alpha males from 3 or 4 different packs got together and killed those rogues. And to preserve this. So that's pretty interesting. We talked about, like you just mentioned, how would they be in nature? And what we found is they react like humans. They really, really do. If you're gonna eat my kids, I'm gonna put all hell down. And that's what it seems to be. Any other questions? Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Right now, it's this camera that's on the stream. This camera's the one that's showing on the stream.
No, this one.
So absolutely on the emotion thing. Full gas. We've heard another laughing with his infant. A factory in the videos are probably going to indicate 13.
This is the one that's filming.
Earlier today, I found scat from an infant. And I found scat from another smaller.
I think it's still.
Stuck on my head. And I told the group, man, I think they got a baby. And later at 10 o'clock that
Yeah,
night,
right, it's late.
this is very nice. You hear a laugh of what sounds like an adolescent girl, a little chuckle, or at first you hear an infant just laughing, like giggling, like a little baby. When you get an infant, they cackle and giggle, you hear that coming out of the brush, and then you heard a young female turn the laugh out.
And of course, it stopped everybody in their tracks. And I was with this with J.C. Johnson and Jack Carey, and you may have seen those guys on TV and stuff. And these are the big ones. And they, everybody.
Why won't it let me do so?
Because out of this tremendous, it's a San Juan River, it's a lot like the river systems here, 30 feet wide, 2 feet deep, lots of rushing on. And out of the middle of this thicket comes a baby, Chuck giggling, and the female laughing with it in response. And to me, that was probably the core of what the human
Okay, I got
experience would be in that moment. And it was so expressive of it. As well, the protective nature, am I good? As well as protective nature, there was, and it's on video, the MG-13 as well, there was a very large subject and a smaller subject. I turned, and without aggression really, I turned and made comment to the video
I think we're okay.
I'll go check out the
Oh,
smaller
that.
subject. And as soon as I said that, and with the word that, I got run that. And it just went boom. And just like that second part of that run, the second part was like I got hit in the ribs with a rolled up piece of carpet. You imagine an 8-foot chunk of carpet and roll up and slam some of it. That's what that felt. It felt like. But there was, I didn't sense any aggression. And that was interesting to me because that again is very human thing. It was a very decisive moment of, hey man, you can do whatever you want to do this as a kid. And then right back to being cool again because I went away from that. So I hope that answers your question.
Robert.
Okay, we got time for one or two more minutes. Has the body ever been found? Publicly released? No. Yeah, absolutely, the agencies have recovered bodies, without a question. Are we going to hear about it anytime soon? Probably not. But both alive and dead. And I say alive because I know of the executive director told me about a small one that was left there on the res by the female. The female never came back. So they brought in the Department of Natural Resources. They came and collected it. So that's why. So I'm asked if the Baraka skulls in Peru, the ones that had the coon heads and the red hair, could be any evidence of the Bigfoot stuff. And I'll just say pretty blatantly, no, I don't believe so. The Barakas were actually classified in the late 1800s as Homo capensis. So now they seem to be off the charts. But if you go look the stuff back up, it was a type of human that was being described in the early 1900s. Now they seem to be wiped off the map. But no, I don't believe so. I don't believe it had anything to do with the Nephilim or any of this other stuff. They just don't need to be. It's the Homo capensis. I think we're of a. If anything was of the Nephilim line or any other thing like that, genetic manipulation, I believe Homo capensis was our closest representative of that. Okay, I guess we're going to wrap it up right there. Thank you guys again. Okay, I'm going to squeeze. Wait. I'm going to squeeze one more. Hold on.
You have lots of pictures.
I do have lots of pictures. I have some of Bigfoots themselves. Most of it's surrounding evidence. They probably have photographed maybe 8 individuals over time. If we get a chance, we'll block some of those up later, but follow up with us on Facebook, YouTube, and things like that, and you can find them. Thank you.
He needs to give you his Facebook and his YouTube channel because he's a wealth of knowledge, and he traveled here on his own dime to talk to you. You've heard him. He is a wealth of knowledge. So give him your YouTube channel, your Facebook channel, and Robert, thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Appreciate the opportunity. So you can find us on YouTube at KX Kreider Exploration, and that Kreider is Kryder. You can find us on Facebook, also under Kreider Exploration. We also have another group called KX Cryptid Hominid Group. I believe it's in Bigfoot. And if anything other than that, we are in quite a few places and interviewed on most major shows and things like that. You can usually find us by searching Robert Kreider or Kreider Exploration. And with that, I say thank you very much, you guys. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
we'd like to thank Robert for coming. He's such a good guy. I'm telling you, I've talked to him on the phone a bunch of times, and I sit and listen the whole time. Now, if you're smart, I'm going to you could grab Robert after we're done and just beat him to death with questions. He'll love it. We would like to thank a few people before we get going here. James Anderson, I'd like to thank him because of the sound and the IT stuff. And he's just been great because it wouldn't have happened if it would have been me, I promise. Utah still has some of her DVDs over here, and that's what she talked last year on the Giants. Okay, we've got the XRF going around here if you want to watch them shoot stuff or if you have some samples. And let's take a good break. We're going to come back together. What time you got, Kurt?
About 7:15.
Okay. Let's go until 8 o'clock, and we'll start it up again. And we still have some posters left over with all the signatures of the speakers and stuff. I think we've got 9 or 10, and then we get some other posters too, if you're interested in buying one. It's just, and that would basically be a donation to this, so we can keep it rolling. Thank you.
Everybody want to bring Mr. Trotter back?
Yeah.
Bring him back. Bring back Mr. Trotter. Our last speaker. Bring him back.
Catch him out.
Hey, Robert's a smart guy, and man, we're lucky to have him. We're lucky he came here. And so, and I, for one, appreciate Robert a lot. And
We'll hit the food truck. Terry, he took off.
Robert did?
He's taking a break.
Oh, which way did he go?
I saw him go right there.
Oh, I seen him go this way. He's probably getting. That's a little bit bigger. No. So what's going to happen? And then the forest wind service got wind giving us heartaches. So we moved it here, and then we had a car wreck and blood up there.
But I didn't know that was the first year, though.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I
Well,
thought
that's our kid. This is my program.
I'm Wayne. I live in Berlin. I know.
He's one of the guys with the.
Which one?
He knows your niece. Yeah.
That's your niece, okay? She's doing well. Really well. She knows how to run a business.
I see you really back there. I'm gonna track you down. Okay. Oh, I'm glad you came.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a smart guy.
Hey,
First of
I know. I get it, and you get it. But that was all the scientists. It's that stuff.
well, my happy guy.
Oh, ours is this week. I'm gonna send you a text right now and my picture. My name and picture. Just so you'll know who I am. After walking I got it. What kind of fraud?
All
right, get your drink.
No.
What? I don't know. I don't know if I want anything, honestly, because I don't really drink soda.
Take the soda. Party.
So you can get it in all kinds of different ways, right? That's cool. Coconut?
Is it you or
Okay, good. That's good insight.
Wow.
cow?
The ingredients in this. That's kind of amazing. Ooh, okay. I'll try a lemonade. Toucan?
Yeah, chicken.
Interesting. That's a cool idea. Ooh, I don't want food in it though. I want.
You put fruit in it.
Yeah, I see that because I get the one with the strawberry fruit. I don't know if I want that one though. I think I
You
want
get
to
that
try.
one. Get this. You put it in my drink.
No, I want. Sorry, no, only because I don't like Mountain Dew.
Oh, you don't like?
No, I'm not a soda drinker. I used to be, but I'm not.
No, you get
I'm gonna
that one.
try it.
You get the fruit.
I'm gonna try the Dark Harvest. It's lemonade, blackberry, and peach fruit.
Oh,
That sounds interesting, doesn't it?
pretty good. Oh yeah, what'd you have?
Yeah. What did you get? Pineapple?
I got the mango Mountain Dew.
Does it have pineapple in it?
I bet it does. Which one did
It
you
might be giving you heartburn.
That's what you told them? Yeah. I'm taking that lot.
Hey everyone, I didn't realize that I was live giving my order. So that's hilarious. I hope you all enjoyed that. Let me show you. This is kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought you'd love that. Oh yeah? So you're good at figuring things out then. I appreciate it. Thanks for being a good sport. Thanks for being a good sport to us. Yes. You want me to keep going home now?
I want to show everybody the different drinks because I just think this is cool since they heard us talking about it. Okay, I'm going to do the Dark Harvest.
Oh, I'm glad you brought it.
And several people want to take coffee with sugar and cream, so you can order several coffees.
Let's do one that's a sugar-free Make My Sweet and another sugar-free on the
How cool is that?
Hey, what are you doing?
I'm putting your business live. These guys are awesome. If you ever get a chance, you should definitely check them out. You getting in line?
Oh, having too much fun.
Get in line. We got coffees we gotta order.
You guys ain't leaving, are you?
I'm kidding, by the way.
What?
I'm kidding, by the way.
Oh, wow. Fine.
That's true. He's going to give us a touch and see what
Yeah, look at that. When it gets dark. But the darker it gets, the better. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know who they are. Here we go. Yeah, so be good. Yeah, they're cool.
Outside the game. No, we're not going to talk about talking about the Grand Prix and Mike.
Right here. Right in here. That's
Cold beer on Friday night. A pair of jeans that fit just right. I don't know. Hey, Robert, let me come in and introduce you. Let me come in and introduce you to Wayne here.
Yeah, well, why would they do? Oh, there he is. You know what he does? He wants you to get we should give away.
Yeah. Okay. So the guy from Phenomenon, Nate Smith, loves him right there in the shoot. Anyways, he heard Kreider's thing and he said, "Man, we got to get him from the Phenomenon." So he just hooked up him a paid gig for Phenomenon. Yeah, he loved him. I can talk. Tell me. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna do
trying to round them up. Well, I think it fell in. It fell in. Yeah. That was the last time. That was the one that I said. That's true. I don't have the keys to mine.
I want to see Mark was saying he wanted to see
Yes.
well, I just have my phone. I don't know if you can grab it. It shows you.
Good. It's been a while. Hey, John. So, they say my contrast isn't very good. Do you know how to fix the contrast so it shows up on the screen better? Smile. Look at it. Smile.
Device, okay.
Dude, that works good, huh?
Hmm?
That works good, huh?
Oh yeah, much better than the one we had yesterday.
That's what I thought I bought.
Okay.
Because it was in the box this big.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. You want to see that in the daylight, huh?
Oh yeah. So I'm trying to set the camera
does this every time.
I'm curious, is there any way to see how many people are viewing these?
It was about 70.
70?
Yeah. And I think we'll get people back.
So how was the food? Is it good? So where's everybody from? If you're a local, raise your hand. Well, that's better than the basin. So that's better than usual and not as many as I ever thought. I thought there would be tons, but it's okay. What do you want to talk about?
There's Gene next to you.
Hi, Gene. Okay. Gene is in 1 minute going to tell you what he did today. I was taking on an adventure today. We saw a cave. We saw a Spanish snorkeling area. It was awesome. I found a coin. We had it tested. We know it's not an American coin. It's iron, copper, and zinc. We tested pennies, nickels, and whatnot. It is not an American recipe for a coin. So it is a coin from somewhere older and ancient. Not real ancient, actually, but it has iron, copper, and zinc in it. But it is not American. So. And while I'm here, I'd like to discuss, we tested the bar yesterday, and I had a chance to analyze the data, and I have my theory to conclude this today. Okay? So has anybody here ever heard of Sambaga? Okay, Sambaga is an Aztec gold, which is actually 90% copper. Okay, so they take 10% gold, 90% copper, and then germinated it on it in the smelting process. And in that process, it brings the gold color out of the copper. So copper and gold, they bond very easily and don't separate, and you can bring out that gold color. So the same way, the zinc is a base metal for the silver. So what we're looking at is a silver embodiment. So we have primary amount of zinc, a little bit of silver, just like the gold combined. So if you were to test an Aztec gold statue, it would come back primarily copper. So we're looking at the same thing in a different material. So that's what it is. Okay, what do we got happening here? Hey, I just want to say, all the people that helped us, and there's been numerous more than what we're giving out plaques for, but I want to thank everybody. Well, it takes a lot to put this on, and we couldn't do it without you guys and without the help, so I just want to appreciate it. I just appreciate it. My wife says I yell a lot. In fact, speaking of my wife, stand up. Stand up. Stand up. On August 3rd is my anniversary. This lady's put up for me for 39 years. She's had to put up with me. And thank you, babe. Okay. Yeah, obviously, I tell everybody that's my treasure, and I found her in Vernal, Utah. Dave Bullock, are you around? I don't know if Dave's here. I think he left. Dave Bullock. Hold on. I got no audio on that. No audio.
Sorry?
Yeah, there's no audio there.
What? Yeah, it's working.
Oh. Eddie Brecken tells me there's no live streaming audio.
I think
Okay.
you're mixed up with me. Well, I'll figure it out.
Okay. Daryl Wilson. Daryl. Hello, Daryl.
help to us, help organize some things. I think we can get some advertising for us on the radio and stuff like that. So we just want to appreciate you, appreciate Daryl and here's a little plaque Dave made for you. And if it wasn't for Dave, we turned this into a first-class operation. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Daryl. Great partner! Great partner, come on up here. Great partner, man, him and Yvonne have been a great help for helping support us and putting us on. And I want to thank Greg and Greg, thank you. You're here? Alien Dave. Alien Dave, going once? Walt, the sluice boy, or Tracy Gardner, they're not here? They're not here. Alien Dave, okay. Alien Dave, man, he has supported this gathering. When I first started coming to these, clear back in Morgan, Alien Dave's been there supporting this gathering. So, you know, and he's did a breakout for us on UFO, and I seen he had a big turnout there. He's always been supportive of this group. So, thank you, Alien Dave. It's not, you know, but appreciate you. Madsen? John Madsen. John Madsen. John Madsen, the tech guy. Man, some of this stuff, if it hadn't been for him and some others too that we need to thank, you know, we'd have had a hard time getting this stuff going. John, man, you are deeply appreciated. Thank you.
Get the flyer.
The sound guy. Come on up here, sound guy. James. So, man, he made it so we got the speakers in back, we got the speakers in front, man, he made it so that you could hear this thing, so that I can blast your ears out. And so, thank you. Truott, man, Truott, you're in for a treat with Truott here, but Truott, man, we appreciate you coming here and supporting us, and give us your knowledge, tell us your stories, and man, you guys are in for a treat on the Grand Canyon, the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon. Wild Bill Adams here, Lost Adams here. He did the breakout on the prospecting, the pocket gold, and appreciate you, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. But I want everybody to make a vote. Who's louder, him on the mic or me by myself?
I know he talks the most. So thank you, Bill. Right there. No, I don't get one. So I'm sure there's some more, and he'll figure it out and get to you later. But just know we appreciate y'all being here and all the help. Thank you. Oh, Robert, get over here, Robert. Come here. You. Thanks for bringing us a first-class Bigfoot presentation, man. It ain't much, but man, we really appreciate you. And thanks for he traveled here from New Mexico on his own time to talk to you guys, and man, it was a first-class presentation. And you just don't get that at something like this, that it's free. You don't get something this caliber, you know. So thank you, Robert.
This is for you, darling.
You good?
Yes, it is. Just go ahead and introduce You're good.
I guess I get to be the announcer. So I met Truott a couple of years ago. He contacted me on some other things, but I listened to him for 8 hours straight, man. His contacts, he always got this radio program for 30 some odd years that he's researched the stuff that's hidden from us. And with his contacts, I was absolutely shocked at some of the stuff he told me. And tonight he's going to be talking about the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon, and I'll let him tell his contacts. because he's a wealth of knowledge and he's a great friend. And True, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And with that, here's True on.
Hey, no.
Terry, I love the plaque. Thank you.
That was courtesy of
Kurt,
Jukes, Dave Jukes.
can I trade it in for one of these T-shirts? Terry Carter treasure hunt. Look at the back.
I'm vain here.
Did you know Terry Carter invented YouTube?
Yeah.
I believe it.
I believe it.
I believe it. Thanks so much. Wow, what a beautiful day. As opposed to last year, Terry, gotta say, this is absolutely a step up. Thanks to everybody that was involved. Sometimes the speakers, like me, are anticlimactic. It's a big word.
A what?
Anticlimactic. It's not.
Bill, man, don't interrupt the speakers.
You got a good voice.
You already said. How am I supposed
So
to
I hope
get
I
some
can.
contact?
My goal tonight is to quit talking before everybody quits listening. Okay, that's a sign when you've overstepped and talked too much. And my sweetheart of 42 years, 39, thank you for putting up with all of this. Because without support, you do nothing. My sweetheart says, True, you gotta know when to shut up. She's her favorite thing is like, sometimes I love you to death. Sometimes you've got constipation of the brain and diarrhea of the mouth. Last year I talked about discoveries south of the border around, those of you who were here last year know the story. Just put slides up showing incredible unearthed artifacts coming out that show UFOs and aliens, Aztec, sacrificial rites. Let me just throw something out for you to consider. I don't consider myself an expert in anything. I consider myself a researcher. What I know today, I didn't know 35 years ago. And I hope that I can learn everything more. That some 10 years from now, I can rewrite the script. I'm always learning. That's called being inquisitive. And that means asking the right questions. It's never wrong to ask questions. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter now, and it's like, Grandpa, question after question after question after question. The worst thing I can do is say, I'm too busy to answer you.
Oh, no.
No, you try and explain it to her, and that creates a bond. She calls me Pop Pop. My first grandson, Hayden, and I got the name of it, called me Poo Poo. I'd rather go Pop Pop. My wife still says, I can see why he called you Poo Poo because you don't shower enough, but that's another story. So, Terry was gracious enough, and Mark. I'm just another round of ovation for Terry and Mark. I mean, all the work that they've done, phenomenal. Thank you guys. I don't know what I said last year, but they wanted me back this year. But they said, you didn't talk about the Grand Canyon. Pick a subject and I'll talk about it. 35 plus years in radio. And my radio show is called The Story Behind the Story. We're the original story behind the story. I don't want to talk about me, but I'll tell you something. It's an outgrowth of asking the questions, things that the mainstream media do not want to talk about. The craters of the world, the finding the answers that seem to not be important for mainstream media to touch. So the story behind the story delved into things that I thought were very important, things like MK Ultra, Area 51, those types of things that were taboo to mainstream media. I gotta tell you, I started broadcasting from little Cedar City KSUB radio in the early 90s. And I just wanted a voice, because what is our free speech all about? First Amendment? First, not second. As important as keeping up and bearing arms is, number one is free speech. If we don't have free speech, we don't really have anything. So, I was offered an hour breaking over into 2 hours to broach the topic of unexplained phenomena. I was fortunate enough, whoever listened, we got notified that I got notified or nominated for a Peabody Award. Now, in radio, that's like the Academy Award. In our small little market, and because I've written a few books, I had a literary agent, his name is B.K. Nelson in Palm Springs. B.K. said, guess what? I've got a syndication offer for you. Remember back in the day, little Ruth Westheimer, the sex doctor, remember her?
Yeah.
B.K. Nelson syndicated Dr. Ruth. So she had contracts all lined up, a major company, Clear Channel, same one Dr. Ruth was on. She flew me down to Palm Springs, going to sign the contract, and here I have a picture somewhere in my archives. Dr. Ruth comes about right to here. We have a picture with the two of us, the long and short of it. And Dr. Ruth is not shy. You bet you put in bed, big boy. Type of stuff. You know. My wife is like, sorry, that was a little bad. But why I'm telling the story is because Dr. Ruth made a lot of money as a radio show host. I could make a lot of money also. The contract was extremely lucrative. The signing bonus was over 500 G's. But I read the fine contract, the fine print. I had to agree to be censored. My content had to pass a board. So why am I even on the radio? If it's free speech, there's no censorship. My agent said, it's okay, we'll work it out. No, it's a deal killer. You strike that out of the contract, or I'm not signing. See, that's what we're talking about controlled media. See what I'm saying? So things like this, where we get up and my wife says, you never know what's going to come out of your mouth. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but it's important to understand the reason for a free gathering and exploring these things and asking the questions. Listen, I may not agree with Mr. Kreider and everything he says. I may not agree with UFOologists, but I will die defending their right to say it.
Yeah.
I just asked for equal time to talk about what I believe. Right, fair enough? So, the assignment was true. We need to hear about the Egyptian tongues. Ooh. This is probably the biggest story that I've ever covered in my years in alternative media. For so many reasons, because it overlaps so much. Okay? Part of being, call it humble or whatever, is being grateful for those who've come before you. I need to start out this presentation by paying honor to a guy you probably never heard, Dr. Melvin J. Lane.
What's that? Mike's in the way? Dr. Laney and I forged a friendship early on. Why? I don't know. Providence, perhaps. Dr. Laney is probably one of the smartest men ever to walk this earth, in my opinion. 5 PhDs, a Juris Doctor, plus a medical doctor. Five plus. So anytime he kind of put me under his wing, knew about my radio topics, and basically became a guardian angel to me. And believe me, when you talk about stuff like this, you better have a protector. His level of security, keep in mind this man, his company that he formed, provided the security for the Pentagon. That's the high level of security he had. Highest security clearance. His background is LDS, but he understands the lineage of the sons of Joseph. So I've said, this is honoring Dr. Melvin Laney and all the sons of Joseph. Thank you, Dr. Laney. Let's begin by looking at the history of where this all began. Please don't take my word for anything. I hope you're saying, this is so what I'm going to check it out myself. I want you to do your own research. I got to tell you, 15 years ago, there was a lot more information on this that was objective. Now you look at this topic, and it's all hoax, nonsense. Well, I'm going to tell you, it isn't nonsense. For what that's worth, I'll let you make your own decision. The picture here, black and white. Do you think they had photography back then? This is 1869, when this one-armed major, John Wesley Powell, that must be crazy, to go down the river of no return in little boats. You ever been to Page, Arizona, the Powell Museum? You see those little boats? Woo. Not knowing what's around the next bend, you hear all the water. Whoa. He lost his arm in the Civil War. He was one arm. This picture was actually taken in his second expedition down the Grand Canyon in 1871. He braved it once in 1869. What did he have to go back and do it again in 1871, 2 years later? Why? The answer to that is in his report to Congress. It's what he discovered there. He found a cave around the one bend. He put in, hiked up, got up to it, and went and entered it. And he, in his journal, in his report to Congress, incredible Egyptian artifacts. So, guess who got involved and funded the 1871 expedition? The Smithsonian Institute, the Smithson family. For the sole purpose of photographing it all. So this picture here is with their chief guide, Powell, his name is Tao Gu, the chief of the Paiute tribe. He's there with them as his guide. They're at the confluence where the Virgin River comes into Colorado. You know where that's at? What's that? That's where this picture was taken. Now, I want to say that the pictures I'm going to show you came from Dr. Lane, directly from the Smithsonian. He had high security clearance. And he wanted the story told about what's really in the Grand Canyon. This is why he broke it and why he gave the information to me. This is one of the pictures. Back in 1871, it's all black and white photography. Here's one of the pictures that are in the, there's have been pictures released by the Smithsonian, the National Park Service. You can see these are pretty much common knowledge. This is a picture of a Smithsonian employee known only in the record as Dylan Bob. Whether that was Dylan Bow or Dylan Bob, one whole name. But he's sitting on the sandbar contemplating. This is in the location in Ladora Canyon on the Green River. So the Green River is very placid, you know, it goes, it's pretty easy. But he's knowing, you see, that he may not survive. This is a kind of a fool's errand. I don't know what type of high pay he got, but it probably wasn't enough. Dellenbaugh in his journal reflected upon the inherent risks and dangers to prove the pharaohs. That's in the record. So here is the Red Canyon on the Green River. Ever wonder where Flaming Gorge Reservoir got its name? You know, the big Flaming Gorge, the Red Canyon, there it is. If you spend time at the Utah section of Flaming Gorge Reservoir, you'll recognize the scenery before it was all flooded. Okay? Now, if you look closely, I'll move. Well, maybe I won't move. Down here on the corner, you see the boats. This is the last safe place to go before Colorado jumps in, or the Green River jumps into the Colorado. Notice the size of these little boats. They're not much bigger than a canoe. They're small. Just amazing to me. This picture was, again, 1871. They're still on the Green River. Look how it's very slow moving, it's relaxing, it's placid. Powell's native guide labeled this, quote, the point of desolation. You go past this point, those braves that came down with canoes, they never came back. Point of no return. So there again, you see the boats there in the foreground of the picture. Those of you that float the Green River below Flaming Gorge Dam, you'll recognize this background. Right? So they're ready now, they're prepped to go past the point of desolation, to go into Marble Canyon and start the Colorado experience. Now, here's an interesting little picture. This is John Wesley Powell's boat. He christened it the Emma Jean, after his sweetheart. He figured, well, if Emma Jean can't bring me home safely, nothing can. Notice his chair. He wanted to be on top. He has like safety straps. He's strapped in, one arm again, and notice the lantern, whole oil lamp was all they had for illumination. And on the right side, his life jacket. Ooh. I guess we still had to have life jackets when we run the river back then. All right. Well, of course, the Smithsonian never took any pictures, but they took notes. In 1875, 4 years after they got back, this artist named R.A. Moore was commissioned by the Smithsonian. They did a tintype engraving of what's called a typical rapid scene that the Powell boats encountered daily. Look at that. Flat out amazing that they even survived that. This way. I'm right in the middle. Go. Well, Terry's like going to say, okay, turn the camera. Can you still see? Can you still see? Okay. 1909. Was this all some grand hoax? As deep as the Grand Canyon itself? Sadly, many people believe it to be so. I hate to read things, but this, I'm getting pictures of me on live stream. I gotta work verbally. You look fatter on film. Sorry.
For us tall people, it's not good when you do the down. You do that down angle.
It's the angle. Thank you. Give me the good angle. I'm sorry. I'm going to quote verbatim now from this article, April 5th. Quote, the latest news of the progress of the exploration of what is now regarded by scientists as not only the oldest archaeological discovery in the United States, but one of the most valuable in the entire world, which was mentioned some time ago in the Gazette. Evidence was brought to the city for the newspaper history by G.E. Kincaid, the explorer who found the great underground citadel of the Grand Canyon during the trip from Greenwood, Wyoming, and Colorado. In a wooden boat, he traveled back to Yuma several months ago. He brought evidence of the artifacts. I've never heard of the greatest archaeological discovery in the world. Two people have the story of not. Yeah, so this is, true, we're going to talk about the Grand Canyon. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Let's get the next paragraph. According to the story related to the Gazette by Mr. Kincaid, the archaeologists of the Smithsonian Institute, which is financing his expeditions, have made discoveries which almost conclusively prove that the race which inhabited this mysterious cavern, formed in solid rock by human hands, was of Oriental origin. Oriental. Possibly from Egypt, tracing back to that. If their theories are borne out by the translation of the tablets engraved with the hieroglyphics, the mystery of the prehistoric peoples of North America, their ancient arts, who they were and from whence they came, will be solved. Egypt and the Nile and Arizona and the Colorado River will be linked by a historical chain running back to ages, which staggers the wildest fancy of the fictional. I see on my radio show all the time, ladies and gentlemen. My name is really True. That's on my birth certificate. It's my real name. And so many times the truth is much, much more entertaining than fiction. I keep saying all the time, I can't make this stuff up. I can't write a fictional book that is so powerful as this story. Okay, I'm done. Let's go. That's a teaser. I'm sorry. All right. So, by means of an artist, and based on, again, the detailed explanations by Mr. Kincaid, he described it as a mile-long tunnel. He explored a mile in. I want you to get your head around this. A mile in, underground, he estimates 1,480 feet below the surface. 1,480 feet deep. Okay? The long main passage has been delved into to find another mammoth chamber from which radiates scores of passageways like the spokes of a wheel. Get the mental picture here of what he's discovered? This massive chamber is big, as in giants live there. The Bible tells us there were giants in the land in those days. I personally believe the Bible to be true. I've been on enough archaeological digs in the Holy Land, a lot of it brought by Dr. Laney, asking me to be a part of it, where my job was. Things have been found in the Palestinian sector that just don't make it into the news. Those evil, terrible Palestinian Christians, how evil they are. Oh my goodness. Archaeological evidence proving, I'm going to say this, I'm not going to hold back, proving Genesis chapter 6. Those of you who don't know, you go to read your Bible, crack it open, read Genesis chapter 6. Fallen sons of God, the angels, the fallen angels, led by the singer, the musician named Lucifer, fell to earth, went into the earth. They entered in the earth, in the Hebrew tradition, in a place called Sheol. Sheol means hell or Hades, right? In the earth, and they came up on the surface at times and seduced earth women. They found them to be pretty sexy. And earth women are pretty cool. I'm almost a giant. My son used to say, don't mess with me because my daddy's almost a giant. I don't have 6 fingers, but I'm almost a giant. So, we see these myriad of caverns coming out of the spoke of a wheel. So, in further excavations after 1909, the rest of the story behind the story is, when all this leaked with the Gazette, the cat was out of the bag. Oops. Oops. Too much knowledge. Damage control had to happen. Remember seeing that segment of the Indiana Jones show, Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they bring in these crates and start crating up all the archaeological things that are being found, right? Pretty much that's what happened. They brought a rail spur out to the point, and by a series of cranes and other means, brought out untold numbers of archaeological relics. Put them in crates, put them on a rail car, boom, ship them to the Smithsonian, where they sit today, hidden away in the dusty archives. You know, the Smithsonian has miles of underground archives. I mean, incredible. Dr. Laney invited me and says, I can get you in there short. I said, I don't want to go there. That's the last thing on my list to do. I'm just saying. So the question, like I've heard asked of Robert Kreider, and by the way, Robert, good job. Fantastic presentation. Very good job. The big question is, why are they hiding this? What does it matter? Let's tell the truth about these beings. Tell the truth about them. Why? I asked this question of Dr. Laney dozens of times. Why? What are they hiding? The answer was always the same. They're hiding God. They don't want you to find God, because when you do, guess what? You become empowered and you don't need government anymore. Is that radical or what? Can't have that. So certain stories that are so important, they hide them. And they make up a false narrative. Oh, Dr. Ott, that's all conspiracy. Self-evident. Self-evident. So, going on to the next. There's the picture of the article, Explorations of the Grand Canyon. Here was the picture taken. Now, again, by the time Kincaid took his pictures, there was color. There was some form. There was no longer black and white. So here's the picture of the cave entrance. Now, the location of this, I understand from Dr. Laney, is in the heart of the restricted area of the Grand Canyon. Now, I don't know. I haven't been down there to try and find out. But I understand, and there are some people who have have better insights. There are certain parts of the Grand Canyon you do not go into. Period. They say it's unsafe for whatever reason, this and that. It's a national park. Why is it unsafe? You know, you can go see Old Faithful and the hot springs and the Yellowstone. You don't want to get burned, but you can still see them. Why are there parts of the Grand Canyon you can't see? Here's a different picture, a different angle. You see how it goes in. So here's the Journal of Powell report to Congress describing the talus slope, the rocks, the slick rock. You had to hike up into it, and you could see what was in that crevice. That's in the congressional record. So here is based on Kincaid's details. Here's a schematic he drew of what he experienced inside this cave. Remember, I read in the journal entry, Gazette entry, there's the spoke, the big grand chamber, massively tall, with other tunnels going out from it. You see it looks like a smartphone with red dots. That's an interesting little piece right there. I'll show you some specific pictures about that. But you see the other places going on. There are little catacombs full of artifacts that would make Egypt jealous. Part of my research, the ambassador in 1910, 1911 from Egypt, I didn't put his picture up here, but he was upset. He brought notice to the United States government that this was Egypt's possessions. The president responded, what part of location don't you understand? It's American. They wanted all these artifacts sent back to Egypt. Okay, look at the smooth, how those tunnels are smooth. You see okay? Look closely on the sides of those tunnels. The dirt that was filled, actually, they go down many feet. So a big 9 or 10 foot individual could walk upright in those tunnels. What incredible technology did that? Look closely on all the walls. You see hieroglyphics that are not Egyptian, by the way. They're earlier than Egyptian. They're more like the language of the Phoenicians, the Chaldeans. Even the origin of the Chinese characters are here, dating back about 1700 BC. This is how ancient this really is. So we see all of these markings on the walls, all the way down. Now, according to Dr. Laney, and the photographs from the Smithsonian. These are all from the Smithsonian archives. That's how I got them. This particular tunnel starts to go down, down, down. He believes, and the ancient linguists say this, all of these markings on the wall are warnings. Don't go further. Don't go further. You're not going to like what you find. But Kincaid, explorer, went on down. And in the Phoenix Gazette article, he went down this passageway, got to a certain point, and was overpowered with an incredible smell of snakes. Anybody ever heard or found a den of rattlesnakes in the wintertime? I have. There's an unmistakable smell. A bunch of snakes get together. It smells like a bunch of cucumbers have been sliced up. There's a definite smell. It's not pleasant. This is what he was experiencing there. And it got so overwhelming, and there was such a pervasive sense of evil, they left that alone. Going down, down, down. Is this exciting or interesting or what?
Yeah.
You know, it makes keep going. If you tell me I'm done, I won't wrap up. Here's on the Egyptian panels. Sons of Joseph. You know what this is talking about? This is fairly new and it's Egyptian. Since the Rosetta Stone was discovered, they've been able to decipher this completely. Anybody know what the Rosetta Stone is? Yeah. Able to now interpret Egyptian hieroglyphics. Guess what this is telling me? A guy that's found in Genesis, Joseph. Remember that story? What's the biblical story? He's sold into slavery by his jealous brothers. There's a coat of many colors, right? He's thrown into a cistern, and they wanted to kill him. They thought, wait a minute, let's not be too hasty. He's in the cistern. Let's not kill him. Let's just sell him and profit off of it. Sell him into Egypt. What this story tells is in that cistern, he found an artifact. Didn't know what it was, but it was ancient. It's talking about, it was crystalline. It was made of some kind of crystal. Didn't know what it was. I can just imagine he tucked it into his tunic. They hauled him out, put him in bondage, sold him to slave traders, went into Egypt. You know the rest of the story, right? It's biblical. Something happened where Joseph was able to gain an audience at a high level with Pharaoh. This is the story behind the story of the Bible. The Bible just gives you a thumbnail sketch. This is telling the story. Evidently, this artifact activated an energy field under the Sphinx of Egypt. Imagine that. Pharaoh was like, and you're able to interpret my dream? 7 fat cats, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, and you have this? You are my grand vizier. You're my second in command. You're my right-hand guy. Genesis account says this, and so apropos to our lives. Sometimes evil things happen so good things can occur in His will. It's a wonderful sermon there. Joseph didn't sit around, oh, woe is me. That was divinely appointed. He had to find that thing, and the rest is biblical history. And it ties into us. So when I had this blog and had these pictures and the explanations of what this said, I had Egyptologists come back and say, oh, you photoshopped that. That's what it says, but you... No, I don't know Egyptian. Give me a break. I'm just posting. Don't kill the messenger, Mr. Cryer. Yeah, right? Don't kill the messenger. It is what it is. Accept it or not. So, what happened next in the narrative? As I showed this, and I had a lot of people weighing in on my blog. This is an amazing story. How in the world did Joseph come to the Nile? Or come up, did he have a boat? Was it papyrus boats? How did he come up the Colorado River? You're missing the story. He didn't come over the ocean. He came through a tunnel system. That's a jaw dropper. Part of the narrative explains that the ancient ones had every continent is interconnected. Under the oceans, it doesn't matter. These tunnel systems connect. And they have advanced what they call charities, which is a means of transportation. I'll guess with you how they happen. We've recreated, bullet trains underground. How many of you think Air Force One is really how the president travels? It's one of the ways. But how can the president or the vice president be in Washington and be in LA in a conference an hour later? A Secret Service agent told me off the record about the high-speed bullet trains that our government uses. Not only go from coast to coast, but internationally. Why don't you know this? I submit this information is one of the reasons why it was hidden. Knowledge is power to those who want to remain in power and keep the masses ignorant. See, we're not going to tell you. We're your benefactors. We're from the government, and we're here to help you. One of Kincaid's most amazing things he said in this article, and I won't read the whole thing to you, was whoever was here had an amazing ability for metallurgy. This is, you might recognize this, this is the jackal-headed god Anubis. This particular statue is in the Smithsonian. Dr. Laney said it's verified. It's hardened copper. Copper. Wait a minute. They're not supposed to know about hardening copper back then. They did here in American cotton. Anubis, the jackal-headed god. If you understand Egyptology, this is the god that does shape-shifting. He appears, and you know the Navajo, not the Navajo, the Paiute Indians call shape-shifting. They call him Anubis. I have Paiute Indian friends who witnessed shape-shifting, and they call it Anubis, Anubis, Anubis. Hey, it's so phonetically similar to Anubis, it's not even funny. Just coincidence. This one, ooh, anybody recognize that sitting position? Yeah, that's a lotus position. That is solid gold. And see around the base and the pedestal? It connects Indonesian and Hinduism to the whole message of spiritualism. That's what's amazing about this. It's not their God. In the article, Kincaid said this is their God they worship. I don't think so, because there's no evidence in the hieroglyphics that this is their God. It's part of an energy situation that they're working with. Energy fields. the lotus position, and the flames coming out behind it. It's enlightenment. It's how you can meditate and open up your third eye, your pineal. It's not about religion. It's about connecting to source. Does that make sense? Thousands and thousands of these polished urns filled with all manner of artifacts. Now you kind of know why the Egyptian government wanted these. That's ours. It ties into the pharaohs. Guess what was in most of these urns? Anybody want to guess? Dirt? Guts? Some were, absolutely. They were disemboweled. But a lot of them contained written papyrus scroll material. Whoa. Do you know what Kincaid was saying now? This is earth, this is world changing. Hey, I don't know about you out there, but I kind of feel ripped off. Think about this. Talk about a tourist attraction. What are we paying taxes for? To have this stuff hidden from us? Oh. I feel like I've been hijacked. And I got something inserted without Vaseline. I'm sorry, that's just me. Now, this is amazing. Room after room of mummified warriors. Egyptian warriors. See how high and how tall this chamber is? These mummified remains were put in a standing upright position on a stone ledge with carvings come out. And inscriptions above them with their names. What a way to be interred if you're a war hero. This is better than the Vietnam War Memorial, in my opinion. What a great thing. Okay, look at this. The children and the women were mummified. Okay? This is an example of the sarcophagus of an infant, mummified and wrapped in the chamber. But the amazing thing is the wood. How many of you have been to Egypt? How many pine trees are on the hills above Egypt? There are cedars in Lebanon. Guess what? Analyze this wood and guess what it's made of? Ponderosa pines from the north rim of Fredonia and the Grand Canyon. What's amazing, the infants were all put into these carved Ponderosa pine sarcophagi, but what the story you don't know about is a lot of the common women and children sarcophagi in Egypt are made of the same Ponderosa pine. How did it come from the north rim of the Grand Canyon all the way over? Do you remember the story of Joseph? Do you recognize that all of the agriculture along the Nile was pretty much full? You had to find another source to provide grain for the coming famine. And guess what happened at the north rim of the Grand Canyon? Well, I got ahead of myself a little bit. This is one of the ones that, whoa. It depicts, see the rays coming down? They actually look like little genetic sperm coming down to fertilize an egg. But what it's saying is this is a depiction of the fallen sons of God and their mutated forms, which in the Bible in Genesis 6 called the Nephilim. This explains how the Nephilim were formed. Earth women giving birth, these rather large, strange-looking creatures. They grew up to be giants. It's depicting the genetic modifications that were happening. A lot of story here. So I thought I had another slide here. I apologize, but going back to, and I guess I omitted this because on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, there's been a lot of ancient granaries found. Ancient. They thought could this be Anasazi or cliff dwellers? No, they were way earlier than Anasazi. In fact, in a stone box on the river, there's all these agricultural canals that were put in anciently. They found evidence that were Egyptian. They massively had grain agriculture on the North Rim, anciently. The time of Joseph, by the way. They even found extant, existing wheat kernels. That was amazing because they still sprouted. They were in such a state of preservation, they still sprouted. And it's a very high yield variety of wheat with large kernels. Amazing, isn't it? You don't know this stuff is not common knowledge. So I'm kind of going to wrap this up a little bit. If you look at some of the in the Grand Canyon National Park, you see some really kind of strange names. What's in the name? Well, this monolith around the Colorado River that flows up on the rim of the Grand Canyon is called the Temple of Zoroaster. Egyptian. Who named it and why? Is that just one example? No. The Tower of Setoprene. You know, who was Setoprene? How about this one? The Tower of Ra. Yeah. Like I said, they can't make this stuff. Who named these Egyptian formations in the Grand Canyon? Who did? That's a better picture of Anubis, hardened copper statue. And this is the grandest one of all. Check this out. Grand Canyon National Park. The Temple of Isis. Really? You look at the bottom of the Temple of Isis. See those cliffs? Interesting indentations. That's my final picture in my final slide. Are the mosquitoes biting up there tonight? We might keep going a little bit with narrative, or just keep going. Okay, like I said, if I keep talking, people quit listening and falling asleep. I'll give you some Salmonex, some caffeine. No. So, any questions on the slides? Yeah, go ahead. The question was, are these publicly available pictures? They were on my blog. The quick answer to that is my blog was shut down without any notice. I was censored in 2019. All the stuff was taken out, and I've been trying to retrieve. Dr. Laney helped me get some replacements, but the big bulk was on my public blog, was public information. Okay. Of course, it's all hoax. I'm a big giant hoaxer. Right? Yes, Wayne, go ahead.
Can you speak a little further to the tunnel system, maybe about Romania, the chamber?
Oh, Wayne, you're going to get me into trouble. But it's a great question. Thank you. He came up afterwards. By the way, this is Wayne with Phenomenon. Just want to say thanks for coming. Wow. You might have seen my interview on that. Okay? And last year I talked and touched on that a little bit. one of my good friends, who I've known for years and years, is a guy named Peter Moon. His company's called Sky Books out of New York City. You want to know the big answer to that, to Wayne's question?
Repeat the question.
I'm sorry, yes. The question is, what about the tunnels in other places like entrapped in Romania? Great question. Most people know about that. Let me just give you a little background history. In Romania, that's the home of what? Transylvania and Vlad Dracul. What does Romania have in common with Utah? Does anybody know that? Besides the crazy man up through lots. There's a mountain range in Romania that runs east and west. It's ancient in its form. It's called the Bucegi Mountain Range. It's spelled Bucegi, Bucegi. If you look at pictures of that east-west running mountain range, the closest thing to it in the American continent, the U.S. continent, is the Uinta Range. Most every other mountain range goes north and south, right? East-west. And why? Because of the ancient history of east-west ranges. So the question to answer, the book that you want to read is called Transylvanian Sunrise by Peter Moon. He wrote the book, Transylvania Sunrise. It's a series of books that tells the story that will make your jaw drop. This is not science fiction. This is science fact. You have to ask yourself, why did Romania become included into NATO? He explains that in depth. It's what they found in the ancient tunnels, much like what we're talking about right here in the Grand Canyon. Wow. The ancient ones, the Nephilim, 6 digits, hands, 6 toes on the feet, double rows of teeth. The technology that they discovered there as a holographic hall of records. Whoa, yeah, not science fiction, it's fact. You just don't know about it. So read the book. It's non-fiction. It's amazing. I know this because when they found the hall of records, and wait, I'm not going to hold back. I'm not holding back. When they found the holographic hall of records, it was 2006 and 7. The U.S. Special Forces were involved in that, and it's high technology. The fellow that's in the book, his name is Cesar Brad. Cesar Brad contacts me in Utah. Right? He has a heavy accent, but he speaks English. I don't speak Romanian. He invites me to come to Romania and be a part of the story. Why would I want to go to Romania? I don't think so. Who arranged that? Dr. Lane. You got to talk to True Lot. You know why? Hold the phone. The holographic hall of records talks about a central hub of 7 caverns that are found right here in the Uinta Mountains. And this guy has the mineral rights to it. Do you think the government wants this information out? You know how many people have died over the holographic hall of records? Mm-hmm. And why? Why? It tells you who we are. It tells us we are not some race for some alien progenitors coming back as our overlords and control us. No, we are divinely made by a loving Heavenly Father. And that information, like the sons of Joseph, they don't want that out. See? Turn the lights out on me. That's
Come on, John.
that's the good signal. So yeah. What time is it?
There you go.
Oh, thank you. That's Transylvania Sunrise. Radu Cinema is the story with Peter Moon. It is non-fiction, ladies and gentlemen. And you're going to have a hard time believing. I submit you read it through 3-4 times. The sequel, the next, look at the lines on the mountains. The Sphinx, all of that's there. Tying in. The next sequel is what they uncovered as they went and explored the tunnel system. The tunnel system went first where? Under the Sphinx of Egypt. Joseph had the key. Once he found that under the Sphinx of Egypt, the tunnel system, then the maps were complete, coming to the Grand Canyon and to the Uinta East-West Range. You starting to connect the dots? I want to just conclude with a few things, and I'll get your questions. Let me get to this point. I believe this firmly, what the Apostle Paul, St. Paul wrote, so wise, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. We wrestle not against our brothers and sisters. We don't do that. We all have difference of opinion. That's wonderful. We don't wrestle against humans. Our beef is against the principalities and powers of the earth. And you understand what that means in the Greek and even the Aramaic? It means the unseen forces underneath. That's who we battle against. And when you understand that, everything else starts to make sense. If you have me back next year, and Terry, give me another subject, and I'll try and make a presentation about it. Okay. I want you to look up John D'Souza. John D. Souza. His latest book is called specifically The Extra Dimensionals. The Extra Dimensionals. For want of a better explanation, John D'Souza is retired FBI special agent. He's, as I've talked to him before on the phone, and he hasn't been on my radio show yet. He's kind of third schedule. But listen, he says if you understand the truth about extra dimensionals, you understand everything. It's the key. Whether it's the UFO question, whether it's the phenomenons, the phenomena conferences, it all starts to make sense. I would see if you can book John D'Souza as one of your guests. I mean, it's amazing. His book is top on the Amazon bestseller list now. He is the real-life version of the X-Files Fox movie. And he told me, he says, go back and watch those first 2 seasons of X-Files. I'm never an X-Files fan, but I did what he said, and I'm watching those, and I'm like, wow. Predictive programming, or are they telling us the truth? Oh my. They even talked in one episode about the coming pandemic and the vaccine that would be issued to change our DNA. You can't make this stuff up, right? John D'Souza is right on point with this. Question, yes. Absolutely not. It's not. It's underground. It's not. The question was, does the Smithsonian recognize that statue? They don't recognize any of this. That's the problem. You know, as far as they say, well, true, I pulled this up off some Egyptian website. No, not true. But that's their plausible deniability. Yes, sir.
I met you last year, and I asked you mathematical questions.
Mm-hmm.
Today I'm going to ask you if you are aware of the 10-5-6-5 type bombs that hold our DNA together.
How much time do we have? That's a good question. Yeah, see, the whole double helix in the matrix, it's designed as an energy system. And yeah, those are sacred numbers. And sacred geometry is all part of this. Make no mistake with this. So if the premise is that we were fearfully and wonderfully made by a divine creator, he made our DNA for a specific code. Now, what makes your hair the color it is, all that's part of the genome, right? And you realize during the Clinton administration, our wonderful government spent millions of dollars for supercomputers to map out the Human Genome Project, right? Why? Again, that's the big question. Why? Dr. Laney gave me the answer in our discussions. We talk philosophy. He says, he knows these guys. He calls them miscreants. They wanted the Genome Project during the Clinton administration to be able to prove Darwinian theory of evolution, that there's no God and the heavens judging us. And they were searching for that to prove the missing link that we came from the monkeys. Now, there's some people like Mark that I can say maybe they did. I'm sorry. But they didn't find that. They found instead what they called, and this is on the front page cover story of Newsweek and other big magazines, they called it the God gene. Remember that? The God gene. It's called the VMAT2 gene. That stands for vesicular monoamine transport 2. What that means is 2% of your DNA, your genome, is that structure. That's what makes us different than an orangutan, a monkey, or a Bigfoot that comes and goes. They're missing that because it's a spiritual connection. They found that VMAT2 gene is what connects us to Source. If we're open and honest and willing to seek Him, He'll come and make Himself known to us. That's why it's called the God gene. Here's the big secret. The Moderna modified RNA is CRISPR technology. I don't have time to go into all this. From the Chinese to target people's VMAT2 gene. It's edited out completely from your human genome. I don't want to be political. This is a tie-in, really. You see, they want to sever connection to our Creator. When you edit out the CRISPR technology, the vesicular monoamine transport gene, VMAT2, what happens is this. You still function. You still have hunger. Your body functions work okay. You still have to go to the bathroom. But what happens is your frontal lobes, your pineal gland is closed off. You have no spiritual connection to deity, and you operate out of your reptilian brain stem. The best way to describe it, and the scientists like Dr. Laney, who told me all about this 15 years ago now, he knew their plan. He says, they're targeting the VMAT2 gene. I know it, because I've had security cams in all their high-level meetings with the military-industrial complex. That's their agenda. It's a bioweapon to lose people's spirituality. The best way to describe it is people that have an edited VMAT2 gene, they've lost the ability to love, care about another person, put another person's cares above them. And how else can you function as a married couple? If you don't care about your spouse for 39 or 40 years, you're being selfish. Matthew in the Bible, chapter 24. I'll leave you with this. The last days, he said, before he comes again, quote, the love of many will wax cold. He didn't say the love of all. But he said, as in the days of Noah, so will it be in the coming of the Son of Man. The love of many will wax cold. What does that mean? He just described exactly what the VMAT2 suppression does. It's me first. I'll cut you off in traffic. I don't care about you. It's about me getting what I need. There's a problem with this in our society, ladies and gentlemen. It's becoming more and more pervasive. Give somebody else what they need, and you'll probably get it showered back in many, many forms in return. That's my philosophy. I just want to, that's a picture into me. I treat other people the way I hope they treat me. Okay. Last question, and we'll wrap up. Yeah, go ahead.
Joseph's father, another prophet, gave him a blessing just before he died. I want your opinion on this. And his roots shall run over the wall, clear to America.
That's exactly Dr. Lane. I don't have time to share it, but he wrote a very powerful letter to President Barack Obama. Yeah. The clone. Maybe next year I'll talk about that. The cloning process. But what Dr. Lane wrote is powerful. Said we inherit the seed line of Joseph. We're spread over all continents. We just don't know who we are. His impassioned plea was the presidential order to release this information from the Smithsonian so we know who we are. Powerful letter. So I remember when I said, dedicated to the sons of Joseph. See? And again, it's not so much about bloodline, it's about what your heart is. Now, do you love the truth? Do you want to ask questions? Do you want to find the truth, or is it not important to you? For me, my name is true. I have the curse of Apollonius. I gotta tell the truth. Or try to. I may be mistaken, I may have false information that I don't know better, but I will try and tell you the truth. I promise you that. Mark, we're done. Thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Drive safe. Get home safe.
Thank you, sir. We really appreciate it. Now, let me tell you, Drew, are you good if people come and grab you and talk to you for a little bit?
Just don't kidnap me.
Yeah, we're good. And Robert Kreiner is back. He was back right there. If you wanted to go grab him and talk to him, he said he's willing for questions and stuff. Otherwise, we would have come up here, but it's only got a short time. Oh, there it is. And then we're going to start taking all this stuff down. Thank you for coming. We thank everybody that helped do this. We appreciate the donations. Looks like we got enough of that for next year. Thank you. Be safe, and we'll see you next year. Thanks.
Thank you so much. You saved my life. So happy you saved my life, Sarah. And next year, my dad just found a video, and so we will make sure to go live set up the proper sound. Because that was probably the biggest issue.
Jeez, you're awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Jeez. Look at that. You know, it's serendipity, as Lindsay kept singing to me over and over again today.
I do like her. I like her.
She's wonderful.
I like her.
And we'll have to chat some other time.
Yeah.
She told me some interesting information about that place I asked you about. If you knew anybody who knew. Do you know what I'm talking about? Right north of her?
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to be going back on and showing some photographs of the other side of what we do. And it's more in tune with the base nature of this event. And it'll incorporate ancient treasure history and tie that in with ancient and current alien activity.
You said you were talking with your friend,
and it also goes a little bit along from the big picture.
and you
But primary
were able to see they were digging, and you were like, "What are these guys doing?"
History, ancient
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. But
We'll have to see
so
what she found out.
Yeah. Well, she to take me to the cave. She
We'll just
So,
run
but
through
she
real
said
quick
that when I come
about,
back, she wants.
probably let us
She
see
thought
if we
we
like this
could
stuff
get
before.
together and go do
Randy,
the.
I always wanted to do that
drum.
drum thing.
Yeah,
Yes,
me
I want to
too.
video it. So yeah,
Yeah, we could do
let's
that.
put it
And I'll help
together.
you with that. So cool.
You're awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, you and your wife are awesome. I really enjoyed getting to know you.
I'm
So
glad
thank
you came. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You want to do It's a Wrap on the live? You got
Hey,
it.
am I
Everybody,
on?
they wait for it.
Am I on?
Terry, you're on.
Come here, Sarah.
So these are, you guys may have seen
Hey, real
the
quick, this is Sarah. If
alien-based
it hadn't been
artifacts
for her,
that
this
I
live
have
wouldn't
with
have
you.
happened because I wasn't
And
getting it.
this is the
And
part of the
thanks, Sarah.
dating
And
analysis
Sarah's
done
got
by
YouTube
Arizona
too.
State
What is
University.
it?
It's mindful exposure.
And so those
So check
alien
her out.
artifacts
And with
are
that
not
said,
recent construction. They're
that's a
actually
wrap.
9,700 years old. They were created by whichever culture predated the Aztec Empire, and they were taken from tunnels